Hey, folks, it's 7 o'clock, so I'm going to call the meeting to order. Let's see, this is the November 7th, 2017 Planning Board meeting. My name is Kathy Barnard. I'm the chairman of the Planning Board, and let me introduce the other members. To my extreme right, Brad Harriman, who's the representative from the Board of Selectmen. Next to Brad, Paul O'Brien, Von Dugan, Vice Chairman of the Planning Board, Mike Hodder. To my left, Peter Goodwin, and Tom Brown, who's our alternate. John Thurston, I'm not sure if he's coming. Do we know if he's coming?
I didn't hear from John. I don't know if...
Okay, well, why don't I appoint Tom as a regular member. If John comes, then maybe you would consider stepping down. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Okay, and Matt Sullivan, our Director of Planning and Development, is also here. The first item this evening was to be Colden Corporation on Village Corner Road for subdivision. However, this application has been withdrawn and removed from the agenda since there was no need for this particular hearing at this time. Are there any members of the public here for that item? Okay, because if there are, you can call the planning office tomorrow if you want additional information on that application. The next application, John Hoagland and Sharon Wells. This is a public hearing for 13 Bass Drive, tax map 158-2, case 2017-34. This is for a special use permit, construction of a driveway and installation of a water utility service line. And the way this will go is that the applicant will have an opportunity to present the application, and followed by that, Matt Sullivan will give some comments on the project. After that, planning board members can ask some questions if they choose to, and then we need to determine if the application is complete. If it is, we'll make a motion to accept it as complete and open the public hearing, and any member of the public can comment at that time. This application has been heard previously in August of 2017. Planning board at that time denied the request for the construction of a driveway. An appeal was filed. I guess you're probably going to go through this, Mr. Walker, but then it was determined that there was information that the planning board did not have at the time of the original hearing. So that's the reason that this is back before us tonight. So go ahead, Mr. Walker.
Thank you. My name is Randy Walker. I work for Walker & Varney in Wolfeboro. I'm here tonight with Scott Waller and Randy Tetro from Norway Plains, as well as John Hoagland, who's one of the owners. Neither Scott nor Randy or I were at the last hearing, but we're here tonight to present a new and improved application for a special use permit to enable the owners to put in a driveway and a water line to their residence, which is on the property. And I'll deal with the general overview and history, and I'll leave the details of the application to Randy and or Scott. You're all aware that as a result of the denial of the last hearing, that a lawsuit was filed against the town, alleging that the planning board had wrongfully denied the application. As you appropriately pointed out, I think in part that was due to a poor presentation of the facts by the applicant, as well as perhaps a misinterpretation by the board. But bottom line, we're here to try to clarify those facts and the details. with the hope that that suit will be withdrawn tomorrow. The town planner's review is where I'd like to start, and the town planner just had a single line that I wanted to pick out that says there does not appear to be an alternate non-revocable access to the property. And the reason he says that is because there isn't an alternate non-revocable access to this property. There's only one access to this property, and that's from Boss Drive, where this property has had frontage since 1973, when your predecessors, some 44 years ago, approved a plan of that subdivision. And you have 10 documents in a packet that I presented last week, and I'd just like to run through those from a factual standpoint. The first one is the 1973 plan of the subdivision. The developer was a gentleman named Leonard Boss and his wife Lillian Boss. Not surprisingly, the road, Boss Drive, is named after them. And they did a 15-lot subdivision. Lot 10 on that plan is the subject lot. You'll note that all lots have frontage on Boss Drive or on North Main Street. In 1983, 10 years after the planning board approved the plan, the Bosses sold the subject lot. And they happen to live on this particular lot. So the developer's lot is the lot we're talking about. This is the one where he and his wife resided for a decade after the planning board approved it, the subdivision. In order to get to their lot, they cut through the community area. I don't know how long they owned it after the planning board approved the plan, but it's now been turned over to the association. But they continued to live there and access their property by cutting through the association's property until 1983, when they sold their lot. And the deed in 1983 from Boss to Murphy conveys the property, and you'll note if you take a quick look at it, there's no right-of-way over any abutting property, and particularly no right-of-way over the association's property. And I'll note that there was no need for a right-of-way because they had direct road frontage on Boss Drive. 1987, the Murphys sold the property to Curley with the exact same language in the deed. The next deed, 1998, the Curleys, after having lived there for 10 years, sold it to the Blayhuts. I'm not quite sure how you say the name, but I believe it's Blayhut. And so they bought it in 1998, again, without a right-of-way over the association's property. And in 1999, a year later, this issue came to a head, and the Blayhuts and the association entered into a license agreement where the association gave a license to the Blayhuts. And that license agreement, on page 1, you'll note that there's 4 whereas clauses. The last 2 of those says, and I'll just read the lines, whereas the licensee, which is the Blayhuts, are currently accessing their property over a driveway located on the property of the licensor, which was the association. The second whereas clause says the licensor and the licensee wish to formalize and memorialize the terms of such use. And they have 6 ways that they're doing that, and I'll focus on paragraphs 4, 5, and 6. They're all a single sentence. 4 says that the licensee acknowledges this agreement is not intended to grant an easement. It's just a license, and a license is revocable, where an easement is something that's generally in perpetuity. Number 5 says that this license is personal to the Blayhuts and not transferable. And number 6 says that it's just for seasonal use. That agreement was recorded at the Registry of Deeds in 1999, re-recorded in 2000, and for roughly the next 16 years, the Blayhuts continued to use the association's property with that license as their sole means of access to the property. And in 2016, the Blayhuts decided that they wanted to sell their property, and they went to the association knowing that they did not have an easement to cross the association's property. And you have the minutes of the Memorial Day weekend 2016 meeting just last year. And on page 3 of those minutes, Carl Blayhut says the following. He said he has a buyer for his house who wants an easement to cross the common area to get to his property. The buyer's attorney thinks he should get it. The difference between an easement and a license agreement, which is what Carl has at this time, was presented to the members. And discussion ensued, and a gentleman named Tom McManus then asked, what is the benefit to the association to grant an easement? And if there is no benefit, what are the detriments to the association to grant an easement. And then this Mr. McManus presents a license agreement of 1999 saying, you know, our attorney, I'm just summarizing this, our attorney wrote that this was not an easement. And so that means that our attorney found it important enough to put in the license agreement that this was not an easement. So it was pretty clear in 1999 that there was no easement. And at the end of the discussion, Mr. Blayhat made a motion that he be granted an easement by the association, and no one seconded the motion. He couldn't even get a second from anybody in the association. So not a single person was supportive of him getting an easement over the association's property. And I'll editorially note, and I don't blame him, you know, it's rare that any of us would give an easement over someone else's, over our property to the benefit of them. This is association's property. They have a fiduciary responsibility to protect that property. And they were absolutely under no obligation to give an easement and did not, in fact, give an easement. So the Blayhats nonetheless sell the property to Sharon Wells and John Hoagland, who during the summer of 2016 used the association access to get to their property. And then in November of last year, roughly a year ago, the association wrote a letter to the town manager as well as a copy to Sharon Wells and John Hoagland, and you should have that in your package. And basically, that letter of November 15th says the following: on Tuesday, November 22nd, so this is 7 days forward, our association plans to temporarily close a seasonal driveway in our association by installing a barrier with a lock, signage, and security cameras. Basically, 1, 2, 3 ways you're not going to come over our property. And again, they had every right to do that. So bottom line is, there is no alternate access to this property. It's been very clear. It's never been deeded. It's never been granted. There's no permanent way for the current owners to get to their property, and the traditional way has been blocked. So the solution is rather simple. The owners would like to put a driveway from the town-approved road in 1973 directly onto their property, as well as run a water line down it. They have no alternative way of doing that but to come directly over the property. So their need, I think, is clear and unequivocal. That they have no, the law is rather clear that they have no available means to get in. And without this approval, they are, in essence, landlocked and can't get to their property or have a driveway. And therefore, we would respectfully request that the board grant the special use permit for both the driveway and water line easement. I'd be happy to answer any general questions, or we can have Scott and or Randy address any of the details and do questions at the end, whatever the board's pleasure.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Walker right now? Okay.
Like, we have one hand over here.
Okay.
Thank you for the fact pattern. I appreciate that. Did you find any when we last met on this issue, there was a, and I may have my facts incorrect, but I recall that this was a seasonal development. And I asked the question then, and I'll ask the question again. Inside the covenants of this association, is there something in the covenants that says this is a seasonal development, and were those covenants cared for, represented during the time of the conveyance of the deed to Mr. Hoagland?
Well, I don't think it's a seasonal development for starters.
That's an opinion. I'm asking, is there something in the covenants that says that?
I looked in the covenants for the sole purpose of trying to find a legal access so we could just plow through that access. I couldn't find one. What I found was just the reverse. There was no legal access. In the seasonal issue, I don't think we have any regulations regarding seasonal year-round, and there's at least 2 court cases that say you can convert a seasonal home to a year-round home in any event, if that's what you were driving at. But
What I'm driving at is there anything in their covenants, even if it was in their covenants, that would trump the fact that this gentleman can't get access to his home on a year-round basis?
nothing that I could find, and again, we would have employed it if we could have.
And then the second question, which maybe is not appropriate for you, it might be for the town planner, is the proposed driveway. I got to assume it's kind of steep. I was down there, looked at it today. It's terribly steep. So I assume it meets the pitch requirement. But is there a setback requirement from the proposed driveway that has to be met between the proposed driveway and the association driveway? Do they have to have a setback between the two?
That's not the question for me. I'll defer
I
to
know,
Randy
that's why
or Scott or Matt.
The answer is that driveways are not treated by structures by the ordinance, so they're not subject to the setbacks. However, the Public Works Department does recommend in most cases a 10-foot setback for driveways, but that is a flexible regulation that they use on a site-specific basis.
Okay. Thanks, Attorney Walker.
Okay. Thank you.
And I just wanted to note one thing too. The ordinance does allow for the town to provide seasonal certificates of occupancy, but that is not the case for this particular property. A seasonal CO has not been granted.
Hi, my name's Randy Tatro, Norway Plains for the applicant. And my part in this was mapping the site, trying to get a good base plan for Scott to design the driveway. We did do a retracement survey of the property, did topography, had the wetlands reevaluated, which was the same. We also went to the TRC and discussed the driveway design with Mr. Ford and the rest of the board. And yes, it is very steep. There isn't a lot you can do with a certain grade to get from this point to that point. We've done the best we can on that, and I'll let you grill Scott with some of those questions. But one of the key points to it was trying to get the drainage, existing drainage, to work the best we could based on what was already there and based on what had been done previously. So again, Scott can talk to those details. Mr. Ford had some concerns and asked us to do some additional quantitative drainage analysis upslope of the property to make sure how it was functioning and coming down through the road, how much was directed solely to that point and not being run in different directions to the lake. I'll stay completely out of the legal aspects of it. I do understand them, and I have had conversations with Randy regarding the title and the deed work as far as our boundary survey goes. That said, one of the things that we had to look at on the property was the reference line, the shoreline permit, the existing approved shoreline permit by the state and the town, the existing approved wetlands permit by the state and the town, to try to make sure that we weren't proposing anything that would need an amendment for any of those permits. The one part in, and again, Scott can talk to this, the one part that we will need an amended permit on is the wetland permit, and it's solely for the installation of head walls, which should have been done in the culvert area under the driveway, and those will be temporary impacts only. So we had to have a conversation with the Wetlands Bureau to make sure that we could amend an after-the-fact wetlands permit for temporary impacts only. Scott has had a conversation with Mr. Obey at the state, and he feels that that's not a problem. We're going to send him a letter and a copy of the new plans, so that shouldn't be an issue. Shoreline permit aspects, we stayed away from any additional impacts to that as far as undisturbed land or pervious surfaces or anything like that. So I'm not sure that those permits would be needed to be amended. And to that, I will introduce Scott Lawler. He's the PE that designed the driveway, and he can speak to any of the technical questions you might have. And he's going to want to hand out some colored copies that are a little bit easier to read and understand.
Okay, thank you.
So, thank you, Scott.
Thank you. Again, Scott Lawler from Norway Plains Associates. What I've passed out is essentially the same packet that you received as part of your submittal. But where I've done is the first 2 pages I've highlighted in color to help demonstrate both the existing conditions as well as the proposed conditions. Between Mr. Walker and Randy, they've done an excellent job of explaining the situation, but essentially we were hired by the applicant to design a driveway that its access would come off of Bass Road and go down to their site. We were obviously very constrained with the 46 feet of frontage to design this driveway, as well as working within the already granted NHDS wetlands permit crossings, as well as the comprehensive shoreline permit that was already approved. So we took a look at went out, resurveyed the land, and came up with an existing topography, come up with a cross profile, and designed with that. Essentially what we've designed is a 12-foot wide paved driveway with 2-foot shoulders on either side, with the exception of where it's at the wetlands crossing, at which point it's 1-foot shoulders and guardrails. We were able to keep within the permitted wetlands impact area by the use of retaining walls to help raise the grade up from what it exists today, even with the fill that's there, raise it up a couple more feet to be able to flatten out the slope of the grade as it appears today. And as Randy mentioned, installation of those head walls or retaining wall blocks will impact temporarily some of the wetlands. I've had communications with the Wetlands Bureau about amending the application to include approximately 120 square feet of temporary impacts. These impacts will be done just during construction. Once the construction's over, the areas will be restored back to their existing conditions, seeded with a wetland seed mix, and restored. So as such, given the confinements, given the constraints that we're working with, we've come up with what we believe is the best approach to getting a driveway down to this property, and keeping within the area provided. Within the packets, you'll see construction details for the driveway, the head walls, the retaining walls, rain gardens, our erosion sedimentation control notes. We also provided a typical cross-section for the waterline construction to make sure that it's installed in meeting with the typical waterline constructions. These design details have been presented to the Public Works Director, Mr. Ford, and has been approved. So that's what we have there. I think that's a broad view of everything, and we'll answer any questions that come up. Thank you.
Okay, questions of Scott?
I have one, and it looks like there will be some work on the association land. Is this some kind of an agreement about that work?
Yes, we are proposing a little bit of work on the association land. Part of it is the removal of some gravel that was allowed to be placed during the installation of the culvert. That was an agreement Mr. Hoagland had. Oh, sorry. There would be some additional work on the association land to remove the gravel that was placed as part of the temporary impacts. And we're also proposing a small, approximately 1-foot wide, vegetated swale that will travel along the common property line and then back onto the Hoagland's property. This swale was designed to accommodate the excess water that happens to flow from the neighborhood and Bass Road into the culverts and catch basins that would then drain underneath the association's parking lot. During our calculations, we've determined that under the normal 2 and up to 5-year storm events, that existing 12-inch culvert under the association's parking lot is adequate. But once we start getting into heavier rainstorm events, 10-year, 25-year storm events, that culvert is undersized. In lieu of proposing to rip out that culvert and install a new culvert, what we've come up with for an alternative design was basically an overflow swale that will cut across and back onto Mr. Hogland's property to a rain garden, and then the overflow from that rain garden stays on his property, goes through riprap, the existing riprap swale down to the lake.
And in the last iteration, there was an infiltration trench right at the foot of the driveway in the turnaround.
Yeah, we've decided, it's my professional opinion, that infiltration trench would not work as previously presented. The soils in that area, the gravel, so we've taken that off. I didn't find it to be that useful. So essentially, what we have is a vegetated buffer down to the lake.
Scott, am I correct that there was an issue with the proximity of the infiltration trenches to the septic system as well?
That's right.
It goes against DES policy, I think, even, or recommendations. Yeah. Could you walk through the driveway?
Just a sec.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Where on this diagram is that berm which is protecting the flow of water from the Hogan property onto the association property? I don't see that drawn here. Isn't there supposed to be a 1-foot berm that directs the water or keeps the water?
I'm not sure what was previously discussed at the other planning board meetings. Again, this is our application, our design. What I've done is kind of the opposite. Instead of creating a berm, as you described, I believe is what I've designed is the swale. And so that swale will convey.
Where is that swale in this diagram?
It's on sheet C2, excuse me, C1, the second colored print. If you go to the board here.
Go to the videotape.
So here's the proposed driveway, and the cross culvert
Little squigglies.
heads this way. So starting at the cross culvert here, it runs along here, and about 2 feet off the edge of the pavement.
Okay, Peter? Okay. Okay, Matt, why don't you go ahead? Well, just a second, please. Vaughn, did you have another question?
I do. I'm a little concerned about the rain garden. It looks like there's a 6-foot steep slope on the downside of it. How is that retained when it fills up with water?
The rain garden is designed to allow for the water to come in and go down through the filter media. What doesn't rises up about 3/4 of a foot, and then we have that stone overflow structure.
Asking what the capacity of the rain garden?
What is the issues with maintenance of this garden over the long term? There seemed to be information here that needs to be checked on a regular basis. If there was more than 2.5 inches of rain, I think that you needed to look at it. Who is responsible for that?
That would be the homeowner. It would be his responsibility to.
And if the homeowner doesn't do that and there's an issue, what happens then?
Just that it might blow out.
That would be.
It would be followed up in the planning office.
Yeah, I mean, there are a few potential remedies. Either the homeowner sees a direct impact to their property and they realize that there's maintenance needed to the stormwater management infrastructure, or the planning office could potentially have to act and talk to the homeowner about how to properly maintain their infrastructure on their property based on the plan that was approved. So that would be an.
But is there any checking by the town of Wolfeboro in any way to see whether it's operating properly?
On a regular basis, no. On a non-site plan application, on a residential property, there is not. However, if it became an issue and runoff became an issue, the code enforcement officer would certainly reach out to the homeowner. But no, generally there's not. What I would say is that for shoreland plan applications and approvals, there's an expectation that any stormwater management that's installed would be maintained. So it could become a state and a town issue at that point as well. So there are really a couple different methods through which this could be a regulatory problem.
I guess my question is, who's checking?
town and potentially the state as well.
Okay, Matt.
Just two quick questions. Scott, could you kind of walk us through the driveway profile as far as the pitches as we look at the plan? And the second question is, how does the water line trenching and burying, how does that impact the dredge and fill application, if at all? And where does that water line cross the property exactly?
Okay, absolutely, Mr. Sullivan. So the profile, again, we're coming off Bass Road, and we've got a platform about 3 to 5 feet before then it slopes down at approximately 25.5%. That goes for about 40 feet or so, and then we've got a vertical curve, and it flattens out to around 11%, and that goes for another 40 or 50 feet, and then we pick back up. Now we're pretty much mimicking the existing terrain, and we're at just over 21%. So again, this was our, basically, given the grades that we had to work with, start and finish, this is the best solution that we came up with. The water line is already installed through the wetland crossing area. That was done prior to the permit being issued, hence the after-the-fact wetland permit. That water line was installed below the existing culvert, and with between the culvert and the fill over it, will exceed the 5.5 to 6 feet of cover that the town public works director would be looking for. And at which point then the water line generally follows the proposed driveway, and it goes straight to the house, and it's be metered at the house. A secondary line from the house then comes back up and feeds a bathroom up in the shed, but that's after it's gone through the town meter.
Do you want to add anything else?
I just wanted to sort of reiterate some of Mr. Walker's comments relative to the legal aspect of this. I did just want to note some of the details that are included in my review. On October 2nd of this year, the town did submit a motion to stay and remand the appeal to Carroll County Superior Court. That was based on the information that was provided by Mr. Walker's office to the Planning and Development Department that felt to me to be a material enough change for the planning board to see this application again. Obviously, this application is different as it does include both the water and the driveway element, not just the driveway application, as we saw back in August of this year. Beyond that, I did want to sort of note that the shoreland permit and application conversation, I think, will be ongoing. Should this be approved tonight, I think we have to still have that discussion with these folks, should the planning board choose to approve this. All of my questions regarding the after-the-fact permitting and any amendment via NHDES, I think Mr. Lawler and Mr. Tetrov addressed as well. I did want to comment more to my comments on page 3. The Public Works Director has been intimately involved in the development of this plan, not just through the TRC meeting, but actually through an on-site visit as well, I believe. Dave Ford actually went to the property with the homeowner and the agents as well to review this design. A stormwater or a drainage analysis has been prepared and reviewed by the Public Works Director. I had a chance to speak with him today. He is supportive of that drainage analysis and the proposed design. I just wanted to add that for the board's consideration. And you'll see that the Conservation Commission did have some comments as a result of their last meeting, and those are included in your packets for review as well. But I did want to comment, the application is complete, in my opinion.
Okay, thank you. Would somebody be willing to make a motion to accept? Thank you. Motion to accept the application is complete. And second, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, if there's any member of the public that would like to comment on this, now is the time to do that.
Questions, clarifications. If I may, Jack Lynch, 10 Bass Drive.
Okay, could you speak in the microphone, please, and maybe he could bring the...
Not loud enough where people, I don't need a mic. It's an Irish thing, I apologize. How do we, there's gonna be a lot of fill going through that drain. We have a junction box, a distribution box on the other side of the driveway, on the upslope, that goes in, down behind the small cottage and into the lake. That fills up, we drain it out. But given the runoff going through under our driveway, that becomes a concern to us. It's such a small area. You're talking not as big as this, where it goes one drain pipe to the next, going into, under the driveway, our driveway. Question is, how do you fix that?
Actually, he is. Reducing the amount of water taken away.
Okay, did you have another question, or didn't he answer?
That is a question. I need an answer to that question.
Okay.
Jack, are you referring to what's referred to on here as the drop inlet that's across the street on Boz Drive? Just for clarification. Is it on this side of the road, over here?
This right here, this little spot right there. We're talking this much water going through down flow level slopes. What we propose with the association when this is done is to take riprap on our side of the line to stop our flow into that. But that is such a small area now, you can't put 2 feet or 3 feet together, standing up like this, to get that water under the road, our road. Right? I understand my end of it is the association end of it, but all the flow coming off the driveway and uphill, which is normal, it's going down to the lake. It's going to fill up with debris and stuff and going into our driveway. That is a concern to the association.
Okay, if you're going to speak, if you could come on up to the microphone, please.
Point of clarification for Mr. Walker, too, for you, association. If you have any questions about association policy, I'm here to answer. That's my purpose tonight. I've been here since '78. I've rented there, I've lived here, and the driveway has always been a good neighbor. All 14 of us have access to our common area. It does not preclude, and never has, usage since I've been there since '78. Everyone has had the ability to go on and off either 13 or 13 or 9. We would never change that. That's not being a good neighbor. It's not being a good New England. So I don't think that is a legitimate concern about the license. I voted against when we were doing that. Why do the license? Because everyone has access to that property. We don't preclude anyone. The preclusion for closing the road in the winter was it's always seasonal. We do not want to pick up the cost of maintenance / snow removal / public safety. That has always been since 1978. Times change. Mr. Hoagland is making a great presentation. I have no problem with that. The problem is that's not what the purpose of the association is to do.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Could I just ask one more, Kathy? Could I just ask a quick question? Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry. I'm sorry, it was for the applicant.
Go ahead.
I
Okay,
apologize.
Barbara Hunt, I'm at 15 Bass. I agree with everything in the presentation. I think the end of the presentation got left out. At our last association meeting in May of 2017, because of the issues that came up, we made it clear that everybody in the association, as Jack said, does have use of that road anytime they want, and we have changed our bylaws at that last meeting to provide at this time that any member of the association who wants to plow that road at their own expense to have winter access on that association road to go down to any of those properties or the lake has the right to do that. So that one piece of it just got left out. And my other question, in the construction, you talked about some of this may temporarily impact the association land while you're building the driveway? Is that?
Scott, could you complete? Yes.
Yep.
What I was referring to is that currently, this area here is gravel and it's on the association land, and that Mr. Hodwin got permission to do that when he went to put the culvert in. That area we're calling out to be removed and restored back to its, to a vegetated state. And what we are also then discussing installing a swale that would, along the edge of the existing driveway, back onto his land, that would take any excess water that doesn't flow through the undersized culvert and give it a place to go. Otherwise, it would fill up and go a sheet across the parking lot, which is what presumably is not desired.
Question for Mrs. Hunt, please. Could you give us further details on this association meeting and the mention in changing the bylaws to allow for winter access
There,
to the owner of lot number 10, should he decide to want to plow that?
Yep, there was just, because our bylaws did, as I think Randy, Mr. Walker covered, the road was only for seasonal use. So at that last meeting, we did amend the bylaws to say that any individual could plow that road at their own expense in the winter if they wish to use that road.
When was this meeting held?
We hold a meeting every May. This was the May 2017 meeting.
May 2017 meeting.
Yes.
And
Which I guess you don't have minutes of.
Yet the testimony that we heard in July and August here, subsequent to that meeting, stated specifically by a number of members of the association that there was no winter access to be allowed on that land, on that access way. There would be no plowing to be allowed on that access way, and that emergency vehicles cannot currently access Lot 10 in the winter because that part of the access way is not plowed.
Nope, we changed the bylaws in May of 2017 to provide that any individual could plow that road at their own expense.
But that was not part of the testimony that we received in July or in August of this year.
That had been past practice. I don't know. I know the bylaws were amended. They were in May. I was at the meeting. In fact, I'm in charge of rewriting the bylaws to incorporate those changes.
That was in May. Our records don't show that.
Okay, no, well,
It
that's
sounds
why.
like, it sounds like you folks were trying to find middle ground. That's good.
Exactly.
The middle ground is wonderful, but the timing is important. If we look at our minutes of August 1st, Mr. McManus, who at the time was treasurer of your association, stated, quote, "Mr. Hoagland has every right to access his property. The association has never maintained access in the winter and has no plans to maintain such in the future." He went on to say that the association has never denied access. However, if the association feels that plowing or snow removal is endangering the association, they question their alternatives. Yet there was a meeting in May of your association in which you decided that homeowners could indeed plow if they wanted to,
That's correct.
and that was not presented in evidence at either the July or the August meeting?
But just, I agree. I heard the same words. I recall someone telling us that they parked their car and they kind of schlepped through the snow.
Right.
And so I got it. There is a, I think Randy, or Attorney Walker said maybe there's misunderstanding on both parts. It sounds like we've moved beyond that. The question that was you asked is, what's going to happen with the water is a germane question. And it sounds to me unless I misunderstand, is the water is going to be harvested down through those squiggly lines and then brought to a rain garden. So it's not going to have a net plus impact on, at least as I understand it, on your drain. In fact, I'm not an engineer. It probably have none to lesser of an impact on your drain. And so that I think the issue at hand now is, have we satisfied your, that's a technical question, have we satisfied your technical question, or has this gentleman satisfied your technical question? Okay.
I have a question in that how does this change in bylaws, which you're talking about, which occurred in May, agree with the statement that on Tuesday, November 22nd, our association plans to temporarily close the seasonal driveway in our association by installing a barrier with a lock signage and a security camera?
That was
the year
2016.
before. That was
Yeah, that was-
2016, and that never happened.
Yep.
Okay, so there is actually a bylaw change that is written someplace?
We changed, that was basically for protection of the association at the time, a small time frame. Liability has never been, we've never ever had to worry about plowing, liability, fire trucks, ambulances, as I stated at the previous meeting. So we had to protect ourselves of not having access to the property, because unless something takes place on our property, it's a liability. The May meeting of this year, we changed that. We changed the bylaws, have been registered in Carroll County, to any person that wants to go down there, plow it, remove the snow, whatever, they have access to it. In other words, we tried to clean up what we made a mistake of. We tried to protect ourselves, then tried to clean it
Okay,
up.
do all of your members have a copy of the bylaws?
Yes, everyone has a copy of it. It's
Okay.
registered in Carroll County.
Okay, so this property owner should have a copy.
Yes.
And
I'm sorry, go ahead.
can the association change the bylaws at any time by common vote?
It takes to change the Constitution takes 3/4 of the vote. It's very difficult to do. We don't take, that's why we've had, since I've been here, 4.
Yet your association unanimously overturned Mr. Blahut's request for an easement
Yes, we did.
over his property. So your association does at times vote en bloc. I think I agree with Mr. O'Brien on the board here that the issue has gone further than it had when we last addressed it in August. And at that time, I was one of the more vocal individuals calling for a denial of the application because I was impressed with the fact that there was access, it appeared, to Mr. Hoagland's property over the common access way. It now appears that Mr. Hoagland can have no confidence that he will have unobstructed, perennial for as long as he wants, access to his property. Given the past behavior of the association, given the fact that their prior access was by license, revocable at will, on the death of Mr. Blahut, and there's been no easement ever in any of the deeds from the time the subdivision was set up, allowing access to lot number 10 by an easement.
It's part and you're correct and you're wrong, if I may. In the timeline, we have, like I said before, we've never maintained it in the wintertime. It became a liability issue for the association. We tried to correct that, which we did in the May meeting. Under the Constitution bylaws, all 14 of us have right to common area all the time, 24/7. By changing the Constitution bylaws, we allowed that year-round. Both properties, I asked Mr. Sullivan here, are they summer residents only under occupancy permit? He came back to me and said, no, they are not stipulated in that effect.
I remember that.
The hard part of the question is, why would we, Mr. Hoagland, anyone else, why would we stop? Well, for what purpose? Let's say it's a litigation, non-payment of dues, whatever. You can go to court and stop that because it becomes a safety issue. If somebody's there full-time, you can't close that road. No, would we? And I've been on record as saying that's never going to happen.
Well, the problem that I personally face is I look at your letter of November 15, 2016 to Mr. Hoagland saying they were going to close that subject to gates and bars. No reason given, purely arbitrarily, and cutting off his winter access to his property. You're aware that he's winterizing the property. He intends
He
to
wasn't at
live-
the time.
He doesn't now intend to live there. At what point do we as a board accept the protestations of good behavior in the future from the association when the evidence that we have in front of us suggests that we don't have any confidence in those? We can't have any confidence in those.
I disagree.
Mr. Hoagland can have no confidence in perennial free access to his property absent his own driveway.
I flatly disagree, sir. First of all, it's an integrity issue. Never I would ever do that, nor would the association. It's just not going to happen. In the context of what we did it for was our safety and our liabilities for what we were doing at the time and place. We rectified that at the May meeting of this year. For instance, I'll give you an example. I've done safety my whole life. Let's say for somebody, for whatever reason, arbitrarily, for any concept, would go out and say, we're closing the road this winter. For any, or the summertime. There'd have to be something mitigating to that point. I can see the town,
Okay,
Mr.
could you
Sullivan.
please stick to the issue?
This is the issue. The issue is going back out on litigation. What would be our responsibility for denying it? There is none. We could not do that.
Mr. Lynch,
Okay, thank you. Mr. Walker, did you want to?
Just very briefly, I'm unaware of this May 2017 association vote. Even if they had it, if you giveth, you can taketh away. And as Matt pointed out in his plan of review, there's no non-revocable easement ever been granted to this property in 44 years. If they have a driveway, they have a guarantee that they can get in and out of it without touching the association's property. There's no liability, et cetera. So in the absence of an easement, again, we respectfully request you grant the special use permit.
Okay, thank you. Matt, did you want to add anything else?
At this time, I think we've covered all the issues in my review. I'm certainly open to answering questions if anybody
Okay,
has anything else.
and I just wanted to point out that we did have a TRC meeting on October 11th, and all of the department representatives, including Mr. Ford, recommended approval because our previous hearing, Mr. Ford had indicated that he couldn't issue a driveway permit.
Yep.
So, and the conservation comments, basically, they really didn't change their point of view.
No, but they did add, if the applicant can show that it is no longer possible to access their lot from the communal property, then the
Right.
commission may reach a different position.
Yes, okay.
And my understanding is, in speaking to Leanne right now, is that they did not have the legal submission from Mr. Walker's office when they did that review.
I was going to
Okay,
ask if
all right.
comments on all the
So
documents.
that's a critical
Okay.
piece of that.
All right, anything else, folks? Okay, I'm going to close the, Matt, if you would just go through conditions in the event that we approve this,
Absolutely.
proposed conditions.
Yes, proposed conditions. These are conditions 1 through 7. Condition number 1 being the incorporation of plans. The following plans, as amended to the date of this approval, are hereby incorporated into this approval. And there are 4 plans listed here: the existing features plan, proposed site plan, proposed driveway and water line details, and the details and wetlands profile plan. All of the documentation submitted is incorporated unless otherwise updated, revised, clarified in some manner, superseded in full or in part. And obviously, in the case of conflicting information between documents, the most recent documentation that's noticed herein shall generally be determining. The applicant shall comply with the construction, siltation, and erosion control measures and construction sequence as shown on the plan. Item 4, an inspection by the town should be required of all siltation devices prior to further driveway construction. Condition 5, all federal, state, and local permits to be obtained and received by the town of Wolfeboro. Condition 6, the applicant shall be responsible for all recording fees. And then condition 7, the applicant shall be required to monument the edge of the wetlands prior to any further driveway construction in compliance with 175.91, wetlands boundary monumentation. I'd like to add an 8th condition to this for the board's review, and that's after some counsel with the town's council. This is relative to the appeal of decision that was stayed at the court level. The recommendation is to add an 8th condition here, requiring the withdrawal of the applicant's appeal of decision of the planning board relative to case 2017-18 for this property. So that would be a condition, that's condition number 8 of this. And one thing I'd like to note that the board may wish to consider, with the construction to occur on the association's property,
Yes.
whether or not permission should be a condition of approval from the association for that work on the property as well.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up. It
Yeah.
seems that there should be some document.
Yes, I agree that the work that was done before without permit and permission, yes, we are rectifying much of that. However, there's still work going on the butter's property. So as a result, I think we should ask for permission from the association for that swale work and removal of the gravel as well that's currently on the property.
And do we need anything else as far as the state wetland permit needing to be amended? I mean, you've already put something in there.
Yeah, I don't feel that we do, only because the amendment would be relative to temporary impacts only. I don't think it's a material change to the dredge and fill permit. And then the shoreland side of things we would handle separately
It would be
anyway.
subsumed under number 5 anyway, wouldn't it?
That's correct.
Okay,
What happens if the association doesn't give permission for the removal of that stuff? In other words, here's one requirement, and if
no, I'm
they
sorry, the
don't wanna
public
give it,
hearing
what
is
the
closed.
the
I'm
recourse?
sorry.
It's certainly a potential risk, but I think it's the correct thing to do in this case when the work has
Okay,
been
well,
done.
I am closing the public hearing. Now that the conditions.
Madam Chairman, if I may, I have a specific question. Again, technical specific.
Planning board members, is it okay if we,
I was concerned, as Pete was, with that condition for permission. That doesn't seem like a condition that we really ought to be imposing. That's between the landowner and the association. We have to stick to our own purview. We can't make,
But as it exists, the
Approvals
planning board would be approving a plan with work being done on an adjacent property owner's property. I think that's concerning.
I'd like to propose that we add an or clause to that requirement, or it is relocated, the swale is relocated on the property of the individual.
okay, did you folks mind if Mr. Walsh speaks again? He seemed to.
I think you should open them, yeah.
Is that okay, folks?
Again.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
Go ahead.
Oh, sure.
My engineering. What are we going to do? What are you
No,
gonna do
no,
with
please, could you speak to us, please?
Okay, please. What are you going to do with the snow?
This has nothing,
With the driveway, the new driveway?
And the applicant
under the- given
could
under-
choose to answer the question, but it's not necessarily a part of the application, but they are certainly welcome to answer the question.
That was the reason because they were concerned about snow.
that's not really part of this application process.
okay, let me close the public hearing now. I think we've, okay. go ahead.
Could I just
Go
chime
ahead,
in
Mike.
on a point? I tend to agree with Mr. Hodder that we're wrapping this thing up too tight. We're approving a driveway permit. We're approving a drainage. We're approving the water line. I agree that there's going to be some need to move into association property. If the association has an issue, let the association come forward in a separate proceeding.
Thank you.
We're approving a driveway permit. And I think that, I think what happens here, in my opinion, I might be wrong, but it's just my opinion, is that we get all wrapped up in contingencies here, and this thing could become a rodeo. If there's a problem, the association has an issue, let the association put something together and deal with it.
And that's exactly why.
It sounds to me, and just, and it sounds to me that what these folks are trying to do is to clean up an issue that was created by whatever, And so the net result of this is going to be a benefit to the association, sounds to me. And if the association has a problem with that, I'm sure they'll come forward and they can do what they have to do.
And that's exactly why I mentioned it as a potential condition. I mean, the critical thing here is both Mr. O'Brien and Mr. Hodder are saying is that it's not that we're constructing structures in someone else's property. It's reestablishment or renewal of an existing condition before this work was done. So I agree. I don't think it has to be a condition.
My last point is I think we need to back away from this. There's some feelings here that need to be dealt with. Let them deal with it
On a private basis.
Yeah.
on a private basis.
When we're,
Oh, okay, can we need to talk about what we want to do about this application. Could I
I
have some thoughts from folks?
I would not want the last condition,
No, we haven't gotten to that point yet.
haven't got,
Trying to get a motion to approve the revised plan or deny the revised.
Minus number 8.
yeah, I move that this board
No, not 8.
approve
It's the
the
withdrawal of the
application for a
appeal.
special exception permit to Mr. Hoagland to construct his driveway as shown on the plans presented tonight, 1 through 4,
Okay,
with conditions 1 through 7.
8.
well, 8.
1 through 8, well, that's right, the legal condition, and absent the other condition.
Second.
Okay, motion has been made and seconded. Comments, discussion? Vaughn, were you going to make a?
I voted in favor last time. I see no reason to change my point of view. I think it's stronger.
Okay. down
Can
the
you
se-
remind me what number 8 was?
Yes, number 8 is a condition reading withdrawal of the applicant's appeal of decision of the planning board relative to case 2017-18.
I'm not even sure we need that one, frankly, but nonetheless.
We don't need it,
Well,
but I think it's a good.
I think that it's important to have it. And I voted against this application the first time, but everybody has a right to their lot. The subdivision plan certainly shows frontage on Bass Drive. It was simply a question of the conditions in the wetland ordinance that there seemed to be an alternate access that now there does not seem to be. And so I would be in favor of this application. So any other, go ahead, Brad.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment too, last time I did vote against it also for those, for that reason, that we felt at the time he had an alternate access. And I think one of the other things that I was concerned with, and I think it came up in discussion, was a lack of detail, especially on the grades, the slopes and everything on the new driveway coming down through, which has obviously been redone with this new plan here, like, a lot, good detail. The retaining wall is a good idea along in the wetland to minimize the impact there, so with those changes there, it's,
Right, I agree that they did, with this plan, address all of the issues and the impact, the stormwater management and all
also
of
had-
those issues.
Also had concerns too about that trench drain that was proposed the first time around too in the driveway. I didn't see as that would really do much effect, and they agreed with me, and obviously, because they did an alternate design here, so I was pleased to see that.
Okay, Mike, did you?
Yeah, just one thing, I noticed that snow storage specifically is not addressed in the requirements for a special exception application.
Okay, I'll call the question then. All in favor of the application, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, thank you very much, everyone, for your,
Thanks, everybody.
your time and your efforts.
Whiteout.
You still use whiteout? For what? Did you have one of them poker things?
Okay,
Don't you?
Sometimes they're coming from
next application, Sean and Wendy O'Brien and Joseph and Angela Hasker, This is a public hearing, South Hodge Shore. This lot merger and boundary line adjustment.
Yep.
Tax map 164-5, 164-9, 164-10, 164-42, case 2017-30. The lot merger is tax maps 164-10 and 42, and the boundary line adjustment, tax maps 164-5, -9, and 10. Okay.
Going to Mercer Town.
Kathy, would you like me to quickly walk through the merger first, or?
Okay, I'm sorry. Yes, I thought she was going to do both of them. Okay.
Oh, yeah, I mean, we could, yeah, that's fine.
Before we begin, there were two questions that you raised in your planner's review. Absence of a narrative letter, deed for lot 1649. Have they been satisfied? Second paragraph of under zoning.
Yes, in fact, I should have taken that language out. I apologize. Yes, those have both been satisfied. Thank you for pointing that out. Yes. Yes. That's great.
Oh,
Sure, yeah, I can certainly do that. I can talk about the merger first, if you'd like. The proposed merger is for lots, let me just get my plans out here.
okay. Can you tell us who you are? Okay.
For the record, my name is Lorelei Gerard. I'm the agent and surveyor for both parties. And I can go through with Matt by showing the
Okay.
plans with the discussions so that I try to make it color coordinated. So
All right.
Hopefully I did a good job.
That's very, we need all the help we can get here, so thank you.
And the merger, the focus of the merger is those three blue lots, obviously. Those are lots 9, 10, and 42.
Okay.
Those are being merged to create one lot of 3.11 acres in size with approximately 275 feet of shore frontage. Obviously, no road frontage here. But you'll see as we discuss the boundary line adjustment in just a second, we are remedying some nonconformities that exist on these two lots here via this merger and boundary line adjustment.
Lot 9 is the first lot in the series of lots along the shore. So to keep the consistency, what I call after the lot merger in particular is instead of lot 9, 10, and 42, is that we have a new lot 9, which takes into consideration the two lots.
Okay, and eliminates nonconformities and
There,
Less conforming, more conforming, not 100%.
yeah, and
yes,
there
right.
is a non-conforming structure that's on lot 9 right now that crosses over
Okay,
Into 10?
into 10. Yes, and that non-conformity would be remedied by this via this merger.
yeah, right.
Yep.
That resolves that one issue there. And we go on to the next one. But I can't go to the boundary line adjustment until the merger is approved, because the correlates.
Yep.
Right, but the merger itself is eliminating some nonconformities.
Yeah, but I think with-
nonconforming lots.
Yes.
That's what I was trying to justify the merger.
That's correct. And I think the only point that's being made is we should have a vote on the merger before actually moving on to the boundary
We
line
do
discussion.
need to do
Yeah,
that.
exactly.
Yes,
Yeah.
right,
Is
okay.
lot 10 not a buildable lot?
Lot 10, yeah, it's,
If we started all over again,
if we started all over again, is it a buildable lot?
probably not.
Yes, I could find a way.
Yeah, I mean, it would be an extremely challenging lot to build on.
Vaughn said she'd find a way. All right, got it.
Yeah.
I know Matt has been involved, this application has tried to get to the board since June, and the owner of the 3 lots wanted to keep one lot existing non-conforming, and I said,
right.
to go with the boundary line adjustment. So, and that's a big
I move that we approve this.
I just handed that another new page.
Thanks.
Yeah, we've,
I actually had to go through my file and fill out multiple applications that I wanted, and Eric has that.
Okay. Oh, okay. Okay,
yeah,
so
the
we're,
board denied.
No matter what we did at the end of the day, merging these three lots made three non-conforming lots more conforming.
right,
No, they took-
yes.
Leaving any of those buildable or
Oh, okay, and so we're going to vote on that right now.
Correct.
Okay.
So
Would somebody make,
I just have a concern.
Oh, okay.
Because we don't have a plan that represents that. We have a plan that has other things layered onto it, exchange of two pieces, A and B.
Right, but for a voluntary merger, you don't need a plan. We don't typically require any kind of plan for a voluntary merger.
Okay.
okay?
With common ownership, too.
They have to be in common ownership, yep.
Yeah,
Which
they
we'll
are.
get to- Which they are.
Yeah,
We'll
okay.
get to actually in a,
Okay, would somebody make a motion to approve the merger of the three lots? Motion's been made and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, abstentions? Okay, all right, onward.
next phase where the application is moving forward from today would be taking these two lots and, after the lot merger, as Matt had said, the acreage in the blue area is 3.18. The green area, which wasn't affected by the merger at all, is 5.31. And so I've highlighted the areas of equal exchange in the boundary line adjustment because of encroachments that exist today on each other. So this little shed encroaches upon, from the new lot 9, encroaches upon lot 5. Lot 5's wall radius and two other structures encroach upon lot 9. So the decision was to equally exchange areas so that in the boundary line adjustment, the two lots are still blue 3.18 and the green 5.31 with exchanging these two yellows. So the dark blue is the new lot and the green is lot 5.
Okay.
Okay.
would you quickly cover the waivers that are being
Yes,
requested?
right. Yes, you need to justify the waivers for us. And there are 6 of them.
Correct. That's in the furniture. Okay, I tried to group them together. Yes, there's 6, but there were 3 major portions, and this would be section 174-9, part of the design standards. And the first one was minimum lot size, 2A through F. And the purpose of that was the boundary line adjustment that tax map 164, lot new 9, after 3 lot merger originally was non-conforming, now becomes more conforming. And tax map 164, lot 5 area remains the same and eliminates any encroachments. So as far as doing the minimum lot configurations, we weren't changing anything to the existing lot sizes as they stand today, or after the lot merger, as
okay.
far as new lot 9. The second waiver is still section 174-9 in the design standards, soil information. Again, that associates with lot density calculations and lot sizing. No increase in lot loading is proposed or required, and existing homes have existing septic systems in working condition, therefore still suitable to have replacement in kind if necessary, if and when is necessary. And the third waivers, again, section 174-9, design standards, road access and construction, item 1 through 3. No new road access or construction is proposed or required for the boundary line adjustment. the existing driveways exist, and lot, tax map 164, lot 5 accesses directly off of Hodgson Shore, South Hodgson Shore Road.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Matt, go ahead.
Yeah, just two additional questions, comments that I addressed, I think, in the planner review. The first one is the form factor compliance with the proposed lots. We had talked about this a little bit, I think, during one of the prior discussions.
That's, okay, I believe we were discussing that when they were gonna keep one of the lots
Right.
non-conforming, and then I asked,
So, yeah, I think the way that I think this stands right now is these lots are, I believe, compliant with the form factor. The board could request that calculation to be done, but they're non-conforming lots as they exist now. I think we could certainly request that be provided to us, but
The shape
I don't think
does
it's
not
necessary.
appear to be a problem.
Right.
no, they don't at all. Again, I believe that they are compliant with the form factor. I don't see an issue.
I think you'll find unanimity on the board on that.
Yes.
Yeah, I
Right.
totally agree. Yep. I just wanted to comment that we don't have that number in front of
Yeah,
us. but
okay.
It's fine. And then the last issue is just, I'm not sure if there's a floodplain present on any of these parcels. That is one of our requirements, but I wasn't sure.
I believe I checked at one point and
Okay.
I did not,
Okay,
but I did not ask for a waiver, but I could, if need be, I could. Because tonight I'm only asking for conditional approval since monumentation hasn't been set. I wasn't going to pre-assume that this was approvable. So if there's some additional information needs to be provided, I can do that prior to final approval.
okay. So either a waiver or
Tell you something.
an additional condition of approval. Either method is fine. Whatever the board would like to do.
Okay, any,
For monumentation.
And are we
Yeah.
talking?
No, the seventh waiver could be the provision of floodplain information that wasn't included as part of this, or you could simply include it as a condition of approval.
Make
But-
it easier as a condition of
condition,
Yep.
right.
Okay.
Okay, anything else?
No.
Okay, anyone have any issues with the waivers? If not, if somebody would grant make a
So moved,
motion
Kathy, the
to
unspoken.
grant six waivers, which the applicant has justified. Thank you.
Seconded.
Motion has been made and second. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, abstentions, okay. Then that means that the application is complete. So would somebody make a motion to accept this application as complete, please?
So moved.
Motion has been made and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Do we have an additional condition?
Oh, wait a minute, we have to open the public hearing.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, we're almost there.
Okay, everyone in favor of the motion? Aye? Opposed or abstentions? Okay, so now I can open the public hearing, and there don't seem to be any members of the public. So, any board questions, comments, concerns?
I think it's a very logical exercise and
All right,
find no difficulties with it whatsoever.
okay. And Matt, would you like to
Sure,
go through the conditions?
I will.
And I'll remember to close the public hearing after this one. when you
So
do that.
the first condition of approval, incorporation of the plans amended to the date of this approval. We only have one plan here, that's the boundary line adjustment plan. Condition number 2 is actually, I had an error here with indenting apparently. Condition number 2 is actually at the end listed there. That's the applicant shall be responsible for monumentation and submittal of a certificate of monumentation updated plans. That's number 2. Condition 3, the applicant shall submit the Mylar plan for recording at the Carroll County Registry of Deeds. Condition 4, payment of all recording fees. Condition 5, all the documentation is hereby incorporated. And condition 6, certification of floodplain
Floodplain,
on the
okay.
properties.
Okay, so I'm going to close the public hearing.
That was the one I had.
And again, any comments? If not, I'd entertain a motion to approve the application with the conditions just stated.
So moved.
Seconded.
Thank you. Motion has been made and seconded. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, abstentions. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
You did that quicker than all the
Yeah,
plans you had to go through.
I
and
told
everything.
Randy not to rile you up too much.
Thank you very much.
Good day.
My question is, how did you get a house on two separate lots to start with? That's what I figured. It had to be.
Oh, yeah.
They're the salt of the earth, they're O'Brien.
Normally, you don't.
They're probably from Northern Ireland.
It had to be that way.
Mine's on Beacon Street.
Okay, thanks, thank you very much. Okay, the next item is a lot merger, Susan Hayes and Denise Tanner, tax map 240-24 and 240-26-1.
Shall I?
Yes.
So the owner has requested merger of these two currently undeveloped lots, Lot 24 being 2.31 acres and Lot 26 being 1.93 acres. The resulting lot would be a single 4.24 acre parcel, about 349 feet of frontage on Tips Cove Road. The proposed lot is compliant with the residential district's minimum road frontage and minimum lot size of 1 acre. And again, these lots are currently undeveloped as they exist today.
Okay, and so this is, these are both conforming lots.
They are both conforming lots, yes. Yep.
Okay, all right, so I can't
I don't ask
use that
questions.
as a reason, but they do have frontage on both roads? On
They do.
Well, one does.
Yeah,
One is a class 5 and one is not, though.
It's got a teeny weeny.
Oh, that's not, I mean, Tips Cove?
Tips Cove, I believe, is a class 5 town road, whereas Hopewell Point Road is not.
Okay, well, not all of Tips Cove is, so.
Right, that's correct. That's
Okay,
absolutely correct.
okay,
Yes,
all right, I
yes.
see.
This is, yes, that's a good point.
Okay, so somebody want to make a,
Way.
anybody have any questions about this? Somebody like to make a motion to merge these two lots?
So moved.
Second?
Thank you. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
May I ask a question?
Abstentions? Okay.
Do these diagrams help at all at the bottom, or should I not waste my time providing them?
Yes, yes, they do, when you can
Okay,
read.
all right. I just want to make sure, because they probably take the most time of putting these little memos together, so I just want to, if they're not helpful, I don't want to provide it to you.
No, they're-
No, I think we need them.
Okay.
Otherwise, I'd have no clue.
Whichever, can you do cut and paste? You can't just cut.
You pretty much can, but the memos don't take long anyway, so.
Okay, so the next lot merger, 7 Hopewell Shores LLC, tax map 240-6 and 240-26.
Yes, the board has already seen this, and we had a discussion at this meeting about ownership. These two lots were in separate LLC ownership with the same managing partners, and I ended up having a legal conversation with both our counsel and the applicant's counsel, and agreed in the end to simply put them in joint ownership and redo the merger. And as a result, the merger is 1.22 acres and a 4.71 acre lot being merged. That's a single 5.93 acre parcel. 176 feet on Tips Cove Road is actually just to the south of the merger we just looked at. Approximately 500 feet of shore frontage, and the lot is compliant with the area requirements and the minimum road frontage.
So the only thing that's changed between our last time and this time is that we now have one LLC.
That's correct. That's correct.
Move that we approve this?
Seconded.
Motion has been made and seconded. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, abstentions. Okay. Public comment, just quickly, at the last meeting, there was some public comments by Mr. Green, and he questioned a letter that he had sent to planning board members and was very concerned that no one had ever commented to him about it, and so I didn't really recall at the time. And so I went back and looked through my papers, and I did find a letter dated in July of 2016 that sounded, and that was the time period he gave us. But this letter actually went to the selectmen, and it was about the Class 6 road issue. And actually, I was CC'd on the letter, and Mr. Hodder was also CC'd. The rest of the planning board members were not. And I received a copy of the letter. Someone in town hall, I'm assuming that it was Terry, that gave me my copy. Because Mr. Green had said that he had.
He had represented that he passed it to a person at town hall who said, I can take care of that for you.
Right, so the letters probably went to Ann Marble, and then mine must have.
I've never seen this.
Yes.
Did we get that?
Yeah,
is it appropriate
okay,
to
and
get
it
that?
didn't, I mean, I didn't answer it because it really wasn't, we had already acted on the issue and given our comments, and it had gone on to the Board of Selectmen, so I just wanted everybody to know that I did find the letter.
Had I
You
received this
all
letter, I'd
didn't-
have responded to it, because he's talking about disillusionment, non-transparency, so on, and those are charges that
Well,
one
I
does
would
not
never
like to
answer a letter that had to do with a planning board issue. I would have the office do that.
If you ever do
Right.
receive a letter like this, can you please just
Right,
provide me with a copy
yeah,
of it?
just make sure. Okay, let's see, the minutes of October 17th.
Can I ask, if that letter was sent to my attention, to whom did it eventually arrive? And is there a way of, does the planning board have a box that says planning board members?
The,
Has ever happened again?
my box says, no, we don't have a box for planning board members. Anything attention planning board goes in my box.
Okay.
Or the code enforcement box if it's incorrectly addressed or something to that effect. But the mail all gets reviewed by the same person for our department, so that person directs it to the appropriate person or to the appropriate board when it comes.
Right, and I'm not sure, I mean, I'm sort of wondering if it maybe came from the selectman's office, because I mean, it was just, I did find a copy of it, but I can't recall
Yeah.
who gave it to me.
Well, it's addressed to the selectmen.
Yes, right, and so that's why
There's no difference, is there?
With a CC to Kathy and to me,
and to Mike,
wherever those CCs went, I have no idea.
Right.
Never got them.
yeah. Right, so,
I mean, so there's a maybe a go-do here that, just for town staff, and I'm sure you know this, they don't know this anyway, but somebody puts something in your hand, it goes someplace immediately, right?
Yeah, I mean, letters like this would typically go,
and generally they do.
We
They
can't
go
assume-
to,
We can't assume that this gentleman was not truthful. He passed it to somebody, it didn't get to where it needed to
oh,
go.
yeah, no, he did, and the letter exists. It's just
the
that-
only, yeah, oh, sorry.
Yeah,
The only complication is that if you get a letter post an application decision, it doesn't go in the file of that application because it was received after the fact. So there is kind of a gray area where we still keep those letters, but they aren't necessarily in the property file.
It seems, and we shouldn't be talking about how you do, but if you get a letter from somebody, first thing you do is respond to it. Thank you for your letter. Thank you for your letter.
Business 101.
Pardon?
Business 101.
Courtesy, 101.
but those come from the planning board, from the planning
Well,
office.
they come from someplace. If this person conveys a letter to somebody should say, thank you for your letter. We'll deal with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and somehow that just didn't happen, and
Okay, but
whatever.
I'm not sure, well, I don't think we should let that one go, because we've got letters here. I mean, do we answer all of these letters that we get about applications?
In 99% of the
I'm just
cases.
speaking of tonight.
Yeah, in those cases, those are people I all talked to in person beforehand and said, they told me they would not be here and
Right.
that they would submit something. I said, great, I'll include it in the packet. That's what we do. If I received a letter from somebody relative to an application to be heard, I would pass it along to the board, as I think I've done many times, and I always acknowledge it with them. I say, thank you, this will be passed along to the board, just so they know that it was received. And then in some cases, people email me, it doesn't go through, and they reach out to me via phone, and then I get that communication to you all, so.
Oh, okay, well, in the case, and I meant to mention Don McBride's letter, and I forgot, but everybody did get this. But
Yes.
I really think that we need to tighten up on that, and that should be, if it's coming into the office, maybe it should be included in your report. Just make note that.
The letter was received.
That we got the letter from, 4 or 5 people and mention it, commenting
Yeah,
on
I could do that.
the
I
case.
could add that in to my report. Yeah, I could.
Yeah, do you think that?
Yeah, I got the letter and, about the ugliness of the
Right.
guardrail and all that, and I asked myself the question, at what point does the curtain come down? We put the pencils down on an application, we say, what we have is what we're going to discuss. Anything that comes in after a certain point in time, we'll reference that it was there, but we're not going to judge on it. Because and maybe we can't do that, but it seems to me that, it's like walking up to the podium where, somebody could be passing you new information. And it doesn't give us, it doesn't give us the opportunity to just have a unfettered ability to just ruminate on the issue at hand. If stuff's coming in at the last minute, late breaking news, it seems to me, and I'm not being critical of you, because you're just conveying information that's coming in.
No, but keep
But it
saying,
feels
because you're bringing up a good point.
It feels like it's just kind of like peppering the issue. We ought to probably have like a pencils down, 2 days, 3 days, 1 day, whatever it is. We're done.
Well, I think
Okay, in that case, we always have the right to postpone.
Correct.
And we should do that if we don't feel as if we're.
Well, if we think that all of a sudden there's a lot of churn coming at us, we may
Right.
say, listen, we got a lot of stuff that we need to ruminate on or study, and we may want to postpone.
Yes.
Now, the applicant may go crazy over that because it's just, they may say, my
Right.
goodness, why are you doing this to me? But I just worry on the other side that we get, the last thing that comes into your inbox is the first thing you read, And it just, it kind of, I don't know, for me at least, I can't manage all that stuff at the same time.
it seems to me, though, that up until public comment is over and it's closed, we
Right.
could get anything.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, we can.
So
And at that
it's open
point-
until it's closed.
Right,
Exactly, at which point we can postpone if we feel we've been
Yeah.
done inundated with stuff.
right.
Now, I offer all of that, and I say to myself, everybody should have an opportunity to contribute, right? So I'm kind of belying my own words, but, it just, here's 30 pages for you to take a look at that just came in today. I'm not criticizing anybody, it's just the way it happens. And, you're driving up from Boston and you're in the car and you're kind of looking at charts, and
That's a bad
I somehow feel that I'm not contributing.
Yeah,
Well, everybody should feel comfortable that they've reviewed all the information before they vote.
And that, Matt, that has nothing to do with you.
No, it's okay. And I was going to say, I mean, it's challenging. I sometimes worry about sending information along to the board on Saturdays and Sundays and Mondays that I do sometimes, which is challenging for you all to have time to review it. But I would say if there's ever a critical question that we run into during the public hearing or deliberations that you all feel uncomfortable making a decision based on that question, then yes, continuing the application is always appropriate.
We have done that, too.
And if you don't feel confident in my answer on something, I would urge you to do the same thing, and we will get it fixed.
I don't agree with acknowledging receipt of letters in your planner's review, because that means we're going to not acknowledge the letters that came in after your planner's review has been finished. And I don't think that, since they are parts of our packet, we don't acknowledge every piece of our packet in your planner review or in the agenda that we consider. I think that we should simply work with the materials that we're presented with up until the time the public hearing is closed.
I think what I could do, though, is during my review in front of you all, I could say we've received a piece of correspondence. I can do that. I can do a
It's a
better
matter of
job doing
courtesy,
that.
it's fine.
The only thing that
Right.
also is tricky is,
Well, I was trying to address Paul's issue where he thinks we should answer every.
Well, no, I kind of like what Mike said. I mean, if you get a letter of, and it's a judgment call, what is a letter of substance? You get a letter of substance like the one that was just proffered. That's something that I say, job one, you have to respond to that. If you get a letter of support, or you get a letter that is not, a material. Again, I'm careful in my words here. It's not new facts about a situation we're deliberating on. It's just simply a letter of support or something like that. I agree, with Mike's point of view on that.
It's in the packet.
Yeah. The other thing that's hard to capture too is that before these meetings, I have meetings with people the week before that, abutters, people of that nature, and it's hard to capture that input in a lot of cases that we collect. So I would be concerned about trying to distill that into a report in some way. But
Meetings with abutters you mean that you would have had?
yeah, I mean, I have abutters to come in and look at the file.
That doesn't really enter into our deliberations.
Oh, no, certainly. The only line I would draw there is if I have a meeting with an abutter and they say, I cannot attend the meeting, but I'd like to pass on to the board, I support this application. I have reported this to you, actually, in other applications. I say, I've met with an abutter, they support the application. So that's what I'm saying. Yeah, I mean, I do have those meetings sometimes.
Okay. Minutes, October 17th.
Do I dare move to approve?
Okay, I had, on page 2 at the bottom, 1, 2, 3, 4, fifth paragraph up, Kathy Barnage stated there's an annual conference for new planning board and ZBA members.
Which page? Oh, I see, sorry.
What page?
It was page 2 at the bottom. Let's see, and then there was just a typo at the bottom there, Leanne, the last sentence. Yeah, okay. All right.
Site.
Modern speak, isn't it?
Okay, any other issues? Somebody want to make a motion to accept the minutes as corrected?
So moved.
Motion has been made and second, somebody?
Seconded.
Seconded, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Abstain.
Opposed, abstention. Thank you. Okay. Okay, Matt, our schedule.
Yes. This is a draft schedule for the planning board meetings in 2017. 2018.
So type, document integrity.
I wish it were 2018. 2018. We do have a couple meetings to point out here. Let me just run through and quickly find them.
February.
July, February.
What? Huh?
So yeah, sorry, February, July.
What?
And these are instances where the meeting will fall on the second Tuesday rather than the first Tuesday.
Why is that?
In the case of February, yeah, deliberative session. In the case of July,
I think we
Fourth
have
holiday.
I think we have a birthday on that July 4th day or something like that.
yes,
And November is election.
Birthday.
And November is election, another election.
correct,
My birthday.
correct. So we have some adjustments there.
I'm sure
Okay.
we'll survive.
All right.
18.
And the TRCs, these are pretty much standard TRC dates, right? Wednesdays?
So the dates that you see here, yes, they're all standard, I think, with no exception.
Okay, good.
Yeah, I don't think there are
We just have
any.
one meeting in July.
Yeah, other than that, though, there are no date exceptions. They all adhere to the
Okay.
existing format. Yep.
All right. New state laws. See those.
Yes, and did you all get that document in your packets? Okay.
And the EDC minutes and all of that, we got that, and the Wayside Committee minutes. Received that. Okay, unfinished business, master plan, RFP selection.
Kathy, I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
Master plan RFP selection process.
We have made a selection of a consultant. The bad news is we're still in the negotiation phase, so I cannot share who that is at this time, but we're excited. We have made a selection. We had a competitive interview process. As I mentioned before, I think some excellent proposals, and we're now working at identifying an approach that our consultant is willing to work with us on, and we'll be signing them definitely before the end of the year, but I hope in the month of November.
Can I ask a question, please? Can I ask a
Yes,
question?
sir.
I haven't been here for a while, so I apologize if this has already been answered. Is this planning board looked at what we're asking for in the RFP?
It seems to me that information was sent to us.
Yes, I believe it definitely was. I don't know if we had an agenda item dedicated to it, though, at a meeting, but it was sent to the board as informational. But there was not a...
And I apologize then, because it's, again, it's in the pile. Can somebody resend it to me?
Yes, yeah, I can share the RFP.
What we were asking
Yeah.
these folks to do?
I can share the RFP.
Okay, steep slope. So next meeting, you should have more information on the
Yeah, I'm
master.
hoping we have more information at the next meeting.
Okay,
I just received,
Or-
well, I received some good news, but yes, I will have more information.
okay, steep slope.
Seems okay to me.
Does everybody have the steep slopes ordinance, the new language?
Well, it was in our packets.
Yes, okay, I didn't have it in mind. So I tried to capture the feedback from the last meeting into an amendment to the steep slopes ordinance. I'm hoping to get some comments on this based on our last conversation. I did a few things here, obviously reworded this, removed some references to steep slopes map. I did include an amendment to both the site disturbance definition and the vegetative cover definition to make these a little bit more specific. Specifically when it came to vegetative cover, we had some discussions about the fact that even mowing your lawn or removing grass would rise to the level of removal of vegetative cover, and I don't think that's what the intent is here, so I include some amendment there. Does anybody have any questions about this language, or?
Grass holds and stabilizes soils, too.
It does, but because the site disturbance definition says any activity that removes vegetative cover, we're basically saying if you remove 20,000 square feet of lawn, you're required to adhere to the steep slopes ordinance. And that may be what the board wants to do. I tried to go broad at first. And
again, I wasn't here, so I apologize. And where did the number 20,000 came from? Why shouldn't it be 15,000?
so that 20,000 number was
10,000?
included in the ordinance in its first adoption. It came from a model ordinance that was created by the Office of State Planning at the time. And the town of Wolfeboro basically in its entirety adopted that model ordinance. Yes. That 20,000 square feet, a little less than half of an acre, obviously, that was determined to be an appropriate number. We did have some discussions at the last meeting. The watershed management plan did recommend a lower threshold number there, but the 20,000 was really the basis for the discussion back when the
I
ordinance
think
was
this
adopted.
board felt 20,000 was a comfortable number.
I think that's what I heard at the last meeting as well.
We felt comfortable with it?
Yes, we did. I think Brad had some discussion with that.
Right.
You're okay? That's fine. That was my only question.
Okay, I'm not so sure we should remove grasses.
Okay.
I mean, that means,
Yeah, grasses can be more than just like golf course type lawn grass.
right.
What do you think?
Yeah, and I again, I'd be comfortable if the board goes back to the original
Yeah.
definition. I just wanted to include some alternate here to kind of get the conversation going.
I mean, we've never seen many of these applications, so
Right.
I think we should leave it as it is.
So Kathy, you're suggesting, or what I hear is the striking of grasses, shrubs should be unstruck,
Unstruck,
unstriked?
right.
Okay.
I agree.
What about the site disturbance definition to include excavation of earth? That was something I added in. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So?
Yeah, well, you'd have to, unless you're gonna walk, you know, it's almost duplicative, because if you're gonna remove vegetative cover, you're either gonna do it by hand or you're probably gonna use a machine.
Yep.
And since we got 20,000 feet, you'd be there for a long time doing it by hand.
The only thing I felt that the ordinance didn't capture is if you have barren land and it's on a steep slope, the ordinance didn't really cover that. It only covered where there's vegetative cover. So it didn't cover if you have 20,000, or if you have 15% slopes, it's all barren and you're gonna excavate it.
Like a sand pit.
Exactly.
Oh.
So I thought that needed to be included here.
Or there's a property we have in town that was excavated, because it was just barren, and they excavated, have beautiful rock walls going up and down the property right now.
Interesting. Okay.
You know what that is, right?
Okay, so the site disturbance is okay, and what about the, as shown via a site-specific topographical survey? Is that wording okay?
Does that mean we're requiring one?
Yeah, it does.
If we believe it rises to this threshold, I think we would require one, yes.
I fought that fight and lost, so.
It's sort of a straight face test thing. I mean, if we think something is going to clear this threshold, which should be pretty obvious, we would then say, look, you got to provide us with a topo survey.
But it is half an acre of land, so it's a significant disturbance.
It's
and it
pretty
might
big.
well require
Mike, you said you fought that fight and lost?
Yeah, I thought it was an additional cost to the landowner that was not necessary, but I was persuaded otherwise. So I'm perfectly happy with the language that we're reading right now.
And remember, the amendment as it's written here is the slopes 15% or greater, the 20,000 square feet, all of that has to be 15% or greater slopes. So we're sort of being,
That's a significant land feature.
But wait a second, Mike, I want to make sure I understand here. 'Cause anytime we add costs, we should think about it. But if someone is going to disturb more than 20,000 square feet, it means they're probably building something. And they're going to have to come in for a site plan review. And if they're going to come in for a site plan review, somebody's going to say, well, I need some site plan documents. And the site plan documents probably would include topology.
yeah, the only thing that came up, I think, at the last meeting was
No,
that
they
if
would.
you build a house,
No, hang on a second, Matt. You would anyway. If you were coming in for site plan review for a 20,000-foot disturbance of some kind of a slope, you'd have to show topology, wouldn't you?
With a house, you don't have to.
Yeah, currently you don't have to. Currently you show it on the
Commercial
steep slope
property, you do.
map. See, right now, the problem is that they can point to this town steep slopes map to establish topography, but this town steep slopes map on the fine detail, the nitty-gritty on the ground are inaccurate and not trustworthy.
Well,
So
Hank-
we do need to have, in this case, topographical
Okay,
survey.
well, hang on a second. Now you got me going here.
Paul's point, though, I think, is that the site plan regs do require topographic data.
But not every project requires a site plan.
That's correct, and I think that's why it was specifically residential projects that this board was considered with that wouldn't make it into the site plan review process. Any residential project that disturbed that 20,000 square feet, the board wants to have some zoning in place to protect it.
So we're not saying who or what qualifications are needed to provide this site-specific topographical survey. So Joe homeowner could do his own. It's not that hard.
No, it's not that hard. Excuse me. It's not that hard.
Prepared by a licensed surveyor.
See, I think that's when you start costing people.
That concerns me a bit.
I agree. Because I don't want to, can I ask
But
a
then,
question? before
this doesn't say that.
Right.
Right, it doesn't say that.
Right.
Can I ask a question? On our work plan, 5 March 2017, we talk about the need to revise zoning maps. And some of that may have been, again, that's all it says. There's no texture underneath it, so, it's in the eye of the beholder as to what we meant by that. But I think it was born out of a conversation that came before the planning board of a person who said, I relied upon the zoning map of the town. And then we said, hey, when all else fails, you go to the record. But in this particular case, Are our zoning maps, it's a subjective question, are our zoning maps so far off that we don't have topology in some of our? No.
We don't.
We don't.
We,
Our zoning maps?
no, the-
Yeah, not
It's
the,
just a land area.
Yeah, the zoning map is really just the zoning
Underneath
districts.
that, we don't have topology,
We have some contour data on our zoning, on our online GIS system,
right?
but it's 10-foot USGS contours, and they're
It's
not
based on
particularly
USGS.
accurate. They're maybe
So-
20-foot, actually.
And I'm not trying to, you know,
don't we have isn't the steep slope map with the plan, the natural resources plan?
Steep slopes map is in the NRI, I believe, but
Why
steep
don't-
slopes maps, again, I have my concerns about. I mean,
it was drawn up by Blue Moon, and it's based on
Right.
the USGS.
it's 30,000 square foot. It's the grids.
I'm just trying to find a way for us to not ask somebody to spend more money to
Right,
use
yeah.
the resources that we have available to us, and what you're saying is we have no reliable data.
Right, but you can
I'm
go
just-
out and do your own.
You can go out and do your own, but then you have to write a check.
You do your own by yourself.
You have to still write a check.
No, you don't.
There are LiDAR data available per my
There's
conversation
LiDAR
with
available.
Peter, and we could certainly recommend people use that LiDAR data, but it would
LiDAR
be-
data, which is to 1-foot contours, and it's downloadable from University of New Hampshire. You do have to have the software which can process it.
You got it.
I don't know whether,
Yeah.
you know, but the idea is that it's available and it has some issues, as in if you were in an area with very, very little up and down topography, like a swamp, you're going to get a whole lot of noise because a little tuft of grass shows up and says, oh, I'm higher than that contour, and so there's a little blip there.
But that's not what we're worried
Yeah,
about
we're
here.
worried about,
15%.
That's what we're worried
Pete,
about.
I think at least where I'm trying to go here is we're worried about 15% on a 20,000-foot
Right.
tranche of property.
What I'm saying is that there are some limitations to it because it is, you know, so fine-grained. But when you're looking at a 15% grade, there should be no trouble in figuring that out.
So,
Are we parsing this to death?
no, I'm just trying to avoid having somebody write a check when we have the data.
Right.
That's my only issue.
Yeah,
Well, we currently don't have the data, which is why we're amending the ordinance.
Oh, I thought we just said that you could get that.
Well, it's not part of our current ordinance language, and there are problems with even the LiDAR data. And it requires software, and it requires a certain degree of expertise, which you can't assume every landowner is going to have.
But the town does.
Town's
a resource.
Town is a resource.
If the town ends up seeing that there's an issue, then they ask the question.
I would be willing to offer, we would be willing to assist people if they had an issue with this section of the ordinance. If we're trying to make a determination on whether or not they fall into this, we would certainly take advantage of any resources we have to make that determination. Whether, I mean, obviously we can't prepare the application for them, but we can tell them whether or not they've got an issue on their hands.
And maybe in the real world, we're dealing with a fellow who wants to do soil disturbance, 20,000 square feet, 15% slope. He's either going to be well-heeled enough, big enough individual to bring along his own surveyor, or he's going to say, my God, what do I do? And he's going to go talk to Matt, and Matt's going to say,
right.
"Here, let me help you out."
Yeah, and,
Yeah, and if,
and we adopted this back in 2012, and we've never used it.
I'm cool with that.
So,
So accept the language as it is been
Right.
presented to us.
okay,
We change that we're going to set
put,
vegetative cover.
put grass back
We're
in.
unstriking
grass
grasses
and shrubs as well, just all
Okay.
those three things, okay.
Okay, all right.
Wow.
Okay, let's see, on to Shorefront.
Would you be comfortable recommending that to public hearing with that amendment? What? Do we already
Oh,
recommend that?
yes, that's right, we need to.
So we can check it off and get it
Okay,
off our
all
list,
right.
kinda.
Would somebody make a motion to move this to a public hearing?
So moved. Seconded.
Motion's been made and seconded, all in
Move to
favor,
public hearing
with the change.
With the
It
amendment.
changes, so,
Motion's been made and seconded, all in favor, please say aye. Aye, opposed, okay,
Excellent.
all right.
Awesome.
Well, you're on a mission from the Lord here tonight, Madam Chairman.
Okay.
Then we'll get a lot of business.
Okay, Shorefront.
Yes. Shorefront changes are very minor. This is actually to reflect the change that you saw in the new laws document that I passed along. And to quickly walk you through the changes in the Shorefront residential, I'm just amending the grid segment size to match the state's new definition, and that is a 25 by 50 foot grid rather than the 50 by 50 foot grid that we currently have in place.
And the point system.
And the point system correspondingly, that's correct. And you'll see those amendments shown in the document. I believe there are 6 or 7 of them.
I'm ready to move this to public
Well,
hearing.
actually, I have a comment.
Okay.
My comment is our regulation is on top of the state regulation and more stringent and involves a lot of ground cover and lots of specifics, and it just removes flexibility. Because we have all these plantings and things, now you can't you have to throw them in every 25 feet. You can't say, okay, I want them all on the property boundary, let's say, or
You'd have to
it's
do
just
that anyway.
Right, but if the
only
state
for
is,
trees,
This is-
because
yeah,
for the state.
This is a state
It's
requirement.
all of this stuff that we have in our regulations are different. This is the whole point of it.
no, the only
yes.
changes I made in here are the tree count. I did not make changes to anything that was not tree count.
So you want to revisit the entire shoreland regulation.
I didn't make any other point changes beyond, I didn't change the point requirement for unaltered area, the 1250, the 50-point requirement for 1250 unaltered area. I didn't change that. I only changed instances where the grid segment was the 50 by 50 and there was a 50-point requirement. So I don't think that I've done anything.
Again, my apologies for not being here when you discussed this. What problem are we solving here?
We are coming into conformance with the new state rules regarding this. The state changed from a 50 by 50 foot grid with a 50-point requirement to a 25 by 50 foot grid with a 25-point requirement.
Everything else remains unchanged?
Correct.
The language remains the same.
But Vaughn is saying it's taking away flexibility. Is that what you're saying, Vaughn?
Well, I was concerned that it added more than the state was adding, but you're saying it only applies to the trees, it doesn't apply to our
Correct.
ground cover quotients that we've added on top of what the state added.
Exactly. Yeah, I didn't remove any of that. I only made the changes to the
So, yeah,
This is a copy over.
yeah.
So you're okay, Vaughn?
Move it to public hearing?
Second.
Okay, motion's been made and seconded to move this to public hearing. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Okay. All right, let's see, the C2 zone removal.
Yeah, I'd like to
And
know
I s-
why.
So I am going to tell you a story.
Yes.
And I know it's 9
Yes.
o'clock, but I have to tell you a quick story. I would prefer to ask a quiz question, but I won't. The C2 zone existed in 3 forms before the amendments were made to the Center Street Route 28 mixed-use business district. There was a greater downtown C2 zone, there was a Route 28 C2 zone, and there was also, my memory's failing me on the 3rd zone, but there was a 3rd zone as well. 2 of those C2 zones were abolished when the Center Street Route 28 mixed-use business district was created. They were directly abolished in the warrant
The
article.
third one was the one where,
Right.
yeah.
So 2 were abolished when the Center Street Route 28 went into place. The 3rd was not. And in fact, if you look at the zoning ordinance as it exists today, the C2 zone still exists. It's still a section, a district. It's not described in the district descriptions, but it is included in the actual zoning. There's still dimensional requirements, permitted uses. What's interesting is that when you go to the town zoning map, there's only one parcel that's included in this C2 zone that still exists. And in fact, it's Bean Park in downtown. I would suggest that this was just an administrative error and that the C2 zone was to be removed entirely. But I think I'm trying to formalize that via these changes I've suggested here. And what I found additionally is that the C2 zone continues to be mentioned in a few other areas of the ordinance, and that's why I've given you a comprehensive list of all its mentions anywhere in the ordinance and where that would be stricken therein. But Does that make sense to everybody?
A map would be super helpful.
Yes.
Could we move this to a work session? Or do we, or is there a need to get this done now?
It's just housekeeping.
Hang on. Is there a need to get this done now?
There's no need to get it done at this moment, but I think the change is relatively...
Just seemed like a relatively straightforward issue.
I haven't studied it. When I looked at it, I felt that we probably would want to have more conversation with a picture. So I'll probably just abstain on the vote.
And just so I can show everybody, this is, walk this around, this is our downtown area, and the darker blue parcel I'll show you in a second is the only remaining, one parcel is the only parcel in the...
And that parcel has a permanent conservation easement on it.
It is the only remaining C2 GD parcel.
What about the whole Center Street section? What's
So
that?
that's all been changed in zoning. That's now the mixed use, Center Street mixed use business district. So those C2 zones were directly abolished in the Warren Article. But this zone, for whatever reason, this third zone.
Got
is
an
not.
oops. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's fine.
So again, it's a.
But to answer Paul's question, I mean, if you want more time, that's fine. This is, people are probably going to be concerned when they see this
Who are the
being
people that are
eliminated.
going to be concerned?
People who don't know what this
People that don't understand, so maybe we should, so that we all,
Yeah.
And
Well, if the board needs to do that, that's fine. I'll abstain. I haven't taken the time to study the issue.
And I could,
all I'm saying is that we can give you,
yeah, and I'd have to develop a memo to go along with it as well.
yeah, right.
Outline the history.
You'll be doing that for the public hearing anyway.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
yeah. This change was actually kind of realized through a conversation last week. So that's why I wanted to get it to you as quickly as possible for consideration, but yeah, I didn't have time to put that memo
I
together.
have a question
But
about
we can put it on, oh, okay, go ahead,
I have
sorry.
a second page where it says sexually oriented businesses, blah, 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 established as follows with a colon, and then it looks like everything after that has been deleted.
Yes, so,
So I don't understand what that means.
so a couple things. The 17553 sexually oriented businesses section there under section C, number 1 is the only portion, or that number 1 language is under sexually oriented business. The article below is not. It's a separate section.
Correct, but if
That's actually the zoning that exists in the zoning ordinance that I would propose removing because there are no geographic areas associated with it, with the exception of this parcel.
But if there's a colon, it says there's something as follows, and then there's not going to be anything there?
It's a different article.
Yes, that's a good point.
So it needs to be worded differently.
And can we just eliminate, I mean, is this going to create an issue to not allow sexually oriented businesses? Is that something that we need to think about? Because that's what I mean, maybe we've done it before, but now we're going to do it.
Yeah.
Where do we allow them?
Everywhere.
We don't, it says only in C2.
So just at Bean Park, how nice.
But it can't be within 250 feet.
Your imagination can go wild.
Yeah, I know.
So,
I'm just,
I bet Mr. Rowney is going to be surprised when he finds a little kiosk down there.
so I think it's actually a very good question. I would argue that you may want these standards to exist anyway, whether or not they actually have a district assigned to them. But
I think by law we have to, don't we?
Yeah,
Yeah, I
well,
believe
that's
you do.
what-
And-
Yes, I think so.
I think by law you have to have this in your ordinance, but I think
Right.
these standards are important should something be granted by a variance. I mean, we still have the use definition in our ordinance, but
Well, the solution then is to leave that little teeny section, and it can't be within 250 feet of a boundary, and so therefore they can't exist.
Well,
I think it solves the problem.
how about if we go back to Paul's saying that he would like a little more time to think
Why don't
about
we-
all
yeah,
this?
I think
You do
that might
your
be a good
paragraph,
idea.
and
and while we're on the subject of 175-53, just take a look at the city of Cincinnati versus Mr. Flint, and you'll find out what you can and you cannot permit in zones.
So we're gonna
Penthouse Magazine.
Yeah, I remember that.
we're gonna continue this, are we, to some
Yes, we're going to...
Yeah, we're going to continue it.
subsequent date?
What do you want us to look at?
The question about the permitting of sexually oriented businesses
okay.
in different zones.
Didn't
There is a-
Woody Harrelson
There is
play
a
this?
court case that was in 1988, 1990, Cincinnati, Flint versus Flint. What's his name? The guy who ran Penthouse Magazine? Larry Flint.
Right, well, I think that's about when all this went into zoning regs, so I think we better look into this a little bit.
Would you like me to have the ordinance reviewed? I mean, I can take a look
Well,
at it.
I think it's just a simple question. Can we, I mean, basically, we're going to outlaw them in town.
Planning Association does a document on how to,
Model ordinance?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I remember we had a packet delivered at Sheriff Regional Planning.
Right.
Okay, all right, well, I'll
Okay.
look into the ordinance, I'll look into whether or not we need to allow it in some zone,
okay.
and,
And then we'd put that on the work program for next year, right?
all right.
Maplethorpe is another one.
Okay, well, that was fun. So we're not, we're going to revisit this.
Yeah,
What a smile.
Okay.
okay.
Okay, signs.
Yeah, let's put signs. And I saw in some other minutes that you had received some constructive feedback. Was that kind of summarized and provided to the planning board?
Oh, what minutes were those?
I don't know. It was in the EDC. I think it was in the EDC minutes that, or someplace where on the sign ordinance you had received, or maybe I read it on the town website, you had received constructive feedback. Some people said that the signs were too small. There was
Oh,
kind
that
of
was the wayfinding
Oh, yes.
sign
Yeah, yeah.
minutes, my
Yeah, yeah.
beautiful minutes.
Oh, hey,
You're
You
welcome.
know, I read this stuff.
Yeah, all right.
Now, this constructive feedback, is this summarized someplace, like, bullet form, quotes, notable quotes that we could take a look at?
If it's the feedback, yeah, I can
Yeah.
actually provide it to you if you'd like it.
I'm just asking,
I
was
have
it
it.
provided?
It would be good to have it summarized into, and Peter and I have a full copy of it. in the
I'm not trying
wayfinding,
to
but-
Could I
poke at
provide
it.
the full copy digitally to you? Would that be okay?
Yeah,
'Cause
no,
they're in email format, so.
No, I want it in hard copy like this. Now, when I read something that says it was constructive, I kind of ask the question, well, what does that mean? And if you can send me a soft copy of it.
Well, remember, those were my words.
They were your words?
Yes. But I thought
Yes. Yep.
Can we not assume that the comments that were received are
The-
to be found in the changes made, that Matt has made to the sign ordinance?
No,
We
they are
cannot,
not related.
then
right, yeah.
they're curious and interesting information
What-
to
what
read,
They aren't
but they're not
directly
germane to the purpose
What?
right
They
now.
aren't directly related to these.
No, then they're not. It's,
No, I know, but here's where I come out of this. At some point, we're going to have to take up a decision on what we do here. And what I would never want to have one of us walk up to a person on the street that says, "Did you read my comments?" And I'd say, "No, I really didn't, because I never got them."
yeah, well.
I don't wanna do that.
I thought the comments were good, were good, the ones that
thought
we
they were helpful.
received. And this was, remember, we put something in the electric bill about the wayfinding sign?
Chamber of Commerce was
So-
out there.
Right, and so those people did actually respond to that.
Yes, they did.
Well, why don't we circulate the comments and move on with the language of the proposed ordinance?
Okay,
Okay.
I'll do that.
That would be
So I think I've talked about this at a few.
And this is for wayfinding only, or is it for wayfinding and blades?
Those were wayfinding.
It was the,
Wayfinding.
well, the
Hospital.
wayfinding / blade.
There's a little bit of everything in there.
Yeah.
It's a little bit of a mix.
And could I just ask on this, is there going to be a description of how you apply and who you apply to get one of these signs?
Oh, well, we haven't even gotten that.
Okay.
Yeah.
That'll be in the ordinance.
That
what we
will
do.
be part of it.
In paragraph A, second, let's say the last three lines there, something is illogical. These signs, in conformity with aesthetic values as called for in the master plan, for the convenience, comfort, propriety, economic vitality, and safety of the traveling public. Does the traveling public have an interest in propriety and economic vitality? Or is that really having to do with the town of Wolfeboro? Should we not say something like economic vitality and general welfare of the town of Wolfeboro and the safety of the traveling public? Traveling public have no interest in our economic vitality or our propriety, except as they can enjoy it as they
Yeah,
come through with
just change the words
those.
around, right?
Move it
yeah.
around.
Yeah, that's true. That's good.
So we'll flip those two. Okay. And
Okay, and why are the flags coming out? I know there is a,
because a flag is a type, it's a content, basically, and it cannot be regulated. Because if you're regulating an American flag, you're regulating it based on the fact that it's an American flag.
even though it's under exemption.
Even though you're exempting the American flags? I mean, it seems to me like you're essentially prohibiting
Just the
American.
background to these edits are, and I want people to be honest about these edits, because these edits were performed by our council. So if we have questions, please let me know. I will go back to them and ask those questions. I already had some questions for council, so please feel free to fire away at this.
Good to know where they come from.
So under D1, signs may be illuminated by exterior light sources. We already have something that talks about uplighting and downlighting. Uplighting is, and so this doesn't really,
Doesn't change anything.
well, it doesn't restate what it is already in our ordinance. It's got to be downlit signs, not uplit signs.
Yeah, no, I agree there. That was my comment too. How does this jive with a dark sky requirement? If we're allowing uplighting, then we're violating.
You want to change?
Okay,
Yeah, I
remember
see.
when a couple of years ago, we went through and we said, we say the same thing, but in different words in different places? And I think one of the things we were pretty clear on when we were talking about signs is they should be downlit, not uplit.
Yeah.
So I don't know what the right words are.
Illuminated only by downlit exterior.
So would you
light.
like to, would you recommend a change to that, actually including that language?
Yeah.
Well, there's already something in ordinances someplace that talk about downlighting.
So we just emphasize it again by saying.
Yeah, it's in the lighting section.
Right, something,
So it does need to be consistent with that.
Okay. I guess I'll just open up to comments if people have. It looks like people have already looked through this. There are significant changes on the first page. Obviously, you see that. I have a couple comments in here that did not come from council I wanted to point out, the first of which...
Well, hang on just a second. B6, on-site directional signs for commercial use. I mean, that would be for multifamily, too.
So
We
this is-
allow directional signs on properties other than
Can you give me an example, Kathy?
commercial.
This is where we have to be careful about the intermediate scrutiny question here, because remember, as we talked about at the meeting, commercial signs are subject to intermediate scrutiny, meaning that the municipality can have more regulation related to their content. Multifamily directional signs, though,
Well, churches.
yeah, I mean, we can ask, but I think,
Yeah, I'm just saying that, my only point is that we allow directional signs on other properties other than commercial. That's my only point. And how do we deal with that?
Was commercial use added by council, and is the reason to take into account the current Supreme Court decision
Yeah,
regarding content? And are
yes,
we
so the...
are allowed to regulate commercial?
So I'm going to summarize, because actually these are some of my questions for the attorney as well. The answer was, if the town feels it must regulate content at all, the recommendation was to limit only that regulation to only commercial types of speech or signage. While commercial speech does enjoy a First Amendment protection, it is a lesser standard of review if challenged, and that's the intermediate scrutiny that I discussed before. But he's basically saying, I recommend you not regulate anything outside of commercial signage. It's sort of an at-your-own-risk
That makes some sense then.
issue. So that's why you'll see commercial purposes, commercial use has been added in several locations here for that very reason, because he believes that's the only way we can regulate type at all.
So now we're allowing internally illuminated open signs? Is this something new? I thought we didn't used to.
No.
B7.
7.
Matt, there are all sorts of directional signs on Brewster Academy. That's my only point. There are uses other than commercial.
Right, and I think I need to ask, how do we regulate those? I'm not sure, and do we? I mean,
So,
That's a very
so on the case of, Madam Chairman, on the case of Brewster, you drive into the campus and it says XYZ building that way.
Right.
Are we suggesting that those signs should be regulated?
Do allow. Neon signs we don't allow.
Yeah, well, it's already in our zoning ordinance.
No, I understand that. Are we suggesting that we continue to regulate them?
Not exceeding 4 square feet.
I'm just trying to
Little ones.
point out the possible issues with the changes. That's all I'm trying to do. I'm not promoting anything.
It's a complicated question. I think it's up to the board to decide, but the issue is if we make this change here, any sign that goes on a Brewster's campus will be regulated based on a number that is allowed standard. It would no longer be regulated on the fact that it's an on-site directional sign, because we are not doing that anymore with this change.
So if they put up a new building, the new A, B, C, D, E, F, G building, they'd have to file an application to get a new sign for that building? And they'd have to file an application to get all of the signs that are currently existing that probably say, A, B, C, D, E, F, G buildings that way, and A, B, they'd have to file an application for all of those other signs that have to be modified?
Yes, I would say so. And I'm not sure that not sure that's something the planning board wants to do.
Kingswood Golf Club has all sorts of directional signs.
Yeah, and I'm not sure the planning board wants to do that.
That's a sticky wicket.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
That's a sticky wicket.
Yeah, and one thing I do want to ask them about, which actually came up during the Wayfinding Signs Committee meeting, is campus signage. Basically on-site directional signs, not only for commercial, but for institutional or other uses.
Yeah, and this has nothing to do with the town of Wolfeboro, but, I was involved in a little one of these where inside the campus, the physical campus, radiology, not regulated.
Right.
Urology, not regulated.
Yeah, well, that's true, the hospital, well,
Yeah, I think that's
Emergency
reasonable.
room, not regulated.
I think that's pretty reasonable.
And so you could expand the definition of campus to say a campus is a, whatever we want to define it as, it's a collection of buildings that represent something, typically under a nonprofit.
I think one parcel.
Whatever you want to define it as.
Yep.
I think if we get into the process of saying you got to come before somebody, even if it's you, and not before the plan, but
that's
you
what
would
I'd
find permission to
think we
get
wanna
an
do.
A, B, C, D, E, F, G building.
Yeah, we don't want that.
I think that would be a little nuts.
Right.
Isn't Brewster a commercial use?
In what context?
Institutional.
Isn't Brewster a
It's
commercial
an,
entity?
In what?
no, it's an educational.
Profit organization?
No,
It's
a
an-
nonprofit.
Nonprofit? Brewster's nonprofit?
I guess it depends what context you're talking about. Zoning ordinance or?
I'm talking about a commercial use. Can you
Commercial
throw them
use.
under that?
So I guess they would be regulated by this.
No,
You
no,
could be
they're not a
nonprofit and
commercial
commercial.
use. I mean,
You can be
in
nonprofit.
the ROI
Buy all your property.
overlay, they're called an educational
Right, but
use.
when it comes to
I think these are questions.
could the-
We need to get
these-
the answers to these, and
Could those directional signs be associated with a certain setback from a public right-of-way? In other words, if you are 100 feet back, then you can put as many directional signs as you want to get to the buildings in Brewster. I mean, I don't know whether
That might,
that works, but-
there's something to that. There's something that says our purview is the public right-of-way.
right, yeah.
And if you're a certain distance from that public right-of-way, have at it. As long as you're inside of a campus, like the hospital.
Or Brewster.
Or, as an example, at the Wright Museum, you pull into the driveway, someday we're going to want to put up a sign that says Quonset hut, or motor pool. And to think that we would have to come to the planning board to get permission for that would probably, you know,
Right.
why would you want to
No,
do that?
we don't want to do that.
And if Huggins changes from
And-
being a nonprofit to a profit institution, then now you have to make them do their signs differently?
No, not if you say it's inside the campus.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah, that solves that.
It's inside the campus.
And you have no size regulations, so they could put up a gigantic Exxon station sign if they wanted to, 500 by 500 feet?
We could all go out there and boo at them if we wanted, boo.
They don't want to ruin their campus.
No, I'm not gonna do that.
Well, maybe it's viewable from the public right-of-way.
Okay, I think it requires more
Hey,
looking
not-
into.
Not to mix agenda items, but this is an issue for EDC, right? Has EDC really chewed on this? Because we're going to have a joint meeting with them. I mean, is
No,
this an
we-
issue for the EDC to help us with?
This is something I brought to you first as the planning board.
No, I understand. I'm not being critical here. I'm just saying that this is a big issue for EDC.
Yeah.
Because they're going to get some thought leadership from their constituents. Should this be an issue that we would, and I'm not trying to be mean-spirited, just simply say, please tell us what the right thing is to do. Here's the comments we've received. Here's the proposed wording that we have. Tell us what the right thing is to do and try to be as factual as you can.
How about recommend?
Yeah,
or not
recommend.
even- Not even tell us.
Okay, could we,
Sorry.
I think we really need more clarification. I'm concerned about these. Number C1, remove the fact that we only have the statement that signs are supposed to be only on the premises. That is so basic.
Yeah, I wondered
I
about
don't
that.
even get that.
I'm sorry, what do you mean,
I
Kathy?
All of a
really
sudden,
don't.
I'm seeing a big drink Coke sign
Yeah.
on the side of flowers.
What? That's an
It's
EDC.
it's allowing general advertising.
Any place, that's what that does.
Yeah.
Do we have any people in town that are putting drink Coke on the side, drink
Or
soda
whatever.
pop on the side of their
No.
building?
It will allow anyone to put any kind of advertising they want on the side of their building, whether it has anything to do with what they do inside that building or not.
You're still subject, I agree with you, I'm just making this point. They're still subject to the number of sign requirements and dimensional requirements, just to be clear. It's not that this opens it up to.
Okay, so blacks can put a sign on the side of their building saying, go to the Wolfeboro Inn.
And that's a conversation that I think I've had with some people, even that stopped in the office. I was concerned about that. And the answer back to me has been, well, that's something that maybe is subject to intermediate scrutiny. Maybe you can regulate. So what I would suggest changing this to would be signs shall only refer to a commercial use or activity conducted on the premise upon which the signs are placed. So we can only do this for commercial uses. That's what the suggestion has been from council.
Why can't you just simply say sign, you know, the sign that's on the, I think you're saying this, the sign that's on the building relates to the business that's being operated inside the building, period.
You can do that. I would
Coffee
argue,
shop.
Because that's what I would recommend changing that one to.
Yeah.
And I think to Mike's point, I don't think, and maybe we do want to have some words here, coffee shop, serving Coca-Cola. Maybe the Coca-Cola thing is not a permitted sign.
Well,
I don't know that,
I don't know.
I don't think you can regulate that.
I don't think you can do
You
that.
can't tell a business owner not to, if he's given permission to.
I'm just throwing that out. I'm just trying to invite a little more discussion here, thinking about it.
What was the source of these? I mean, where did this come from?
our council developed these recommendations. They felt that these provisions in the ordinance would be legally problematic.
Didn't the sign committee
Well,
do
you
that?
asked them to.
Yes.
And so they came back with blue underlined.
They didn't say, we have to do this, emergency. You asked.
That's correct, but this change has been in place, and
Yeah,
I would argue that we should not be enforcing provisions that are identified here as potentially problematic, or should at least be careful enforcing them, because Reed versus Gilbert, that decision has been in place for over a year. So
right.
it's not an emergency, but it's definitely something we
Right.
need to be careful about.
Yeah,
So here,
right.
and I apologize for being away from the sign committee for 2 years. I think there's two types of signs, right? There's signs that say hospital, restrooms, right? University. My favorite, museum. Those are pretty benign. We can put them on our property. They'll tell you how to get some downtown. You know, they tell you how to get there. I think those we take off to the side, fix them, move
Yeah,
on.
those are directionals.
Those are whatever you call them, wayfinding or directional. When you're getting into this stuff, this is where I think EDC can help us a bunch with some recommendations.
Yeah,
But the basic wayfinding sign, again, my favorite, museum. Hey, if we're going to be a museum town, I want museum signs all over the damn
Let
place.
me make a suggestion.
Museum.
Why don't we take what Paul has said earlier, and what he's suggesting now, and run a work session with EDC
Well,
on this?
we have one scheduled next Tuesday.
But I think out of respect for our friends at the Economic Development Committee, they need to be briefed, and they need to come prepared, or we're going to have a
Okay, well,
whistling Dixie.
we can do that on Tuesday. Tell them that there's some issues, and, you know, it would be good if we could appoint a little subcommittee,
Yeah.
maybe to wrestle with the issues.
This is important. I mean, I know that Kathy, and I say this with the highest amount of respect, I know that, you know, you took this one on because the Board of Selectmen said this is this is an issue. And this has been in the weeds for a period of time, and we need to land it. And I think the EDC can help us as long as there's fact-based conversation.
Okay, so that's wayfinding, but this is because of some new law that was passed.
Correct.
Supreme Court decision.
Supreme Court decision.
And I have one other on the last page, temporary public event sign. For charitable, commercial public events? Why,
Doing is taking our current ordinance.
Right.
Putting it
I mean, some of these things we wrestled so long and hard with in order to give people some flexibility. And charitable
Doesn't make any
commercial events like the Huggins Hospital Street Fair
Oh, we're going to get rid of that one.
and Artists in the Park and the Hospice Home Tour.
It seems to me that we should have had some synopsis of the new law or something to make any sense out of this.
Right.
Why are
Okay.
political signs deleted? Must comply
if
with
it's a
New
vacuum.
Hampshire RSA.
Can we table this to the work session? This is a non-productive discussion at this point, and I think I need to give you all more information. So I would prefer to
Okay.
just table this. This is not moving in any direction, so I think it's best just put this off to the
Well,
bid.
I mean, you gave it to us.
No, and I don't think I gave you enough information.
Hey, Matt,
Talking
you're not
about
alone. This thing's
concerns and
been,
things that need more information. That's what, this is a discussion.
Yeah, no, I'm just concerned about bringing this to the EDC joint meeting if
Well,
we're not sure. if
You've
the
brought it
planning
to
board's-
us, and we're trying to comment.
Oh, right, no, I just don't, I don't want to, there are a lot of questions that I don't have the answers to that I think I should have the answers to, so I'm just kind of suggesting, should we wait on this until a later time when I can have these, when I can
Okay.
put together a synopsis of what all these changes really mean?
I would prefer we do it then and rather than next Tuesday or whenever our work
No, not
session is.
next Tuesday.
Yeah, because this
you know
is,
what?
Yeah.
You know what? It'll just be a, shoot from the hip.
Yep.
And I don't think we should be regulating by shooting from the hip. And Matt, you're not, thank you for, your commentary about, you should have more information. Whether it's by statute or whether it's by, what we've been working on, this is a tough issue. There's a lot of hair on this thing. And it's emotional. We got to get it right.
This is the most intractable issue the planning board has had to work on in 15
yeah.
years.
Yeah,
I don't
and
know,
most
since the
intractable
last
one was-
time we worked on
I
it.
think the most intractable one was trying to do that zoning out on Route 28. I thought that was a real bear.
Signs have come up and bitten us on the derriere for years now, and they're still not settled.
Okay, Matt, is
Yeah.
there a way to summarize that loss?
Yeah,
I mean, it would be good, because remember, we've got to take this to the public.
yeah, and I don't think, I'm actually going to put
And-
together a summary because I don't think the documentation that's been shared is going to shed much light on these changes. Because we've talked about the take-home from that change, and the take-home is, if you have to see what's in the sign to regulate it, it's not a legal regulation. And that doesn't really help with a lot of these changes.
You have to read the content, it's not legal.
If you have to read the content on the sign or know what the sign says in order to determine whether it's permissible or not, that's not legal.
Right, because you're regulating speech.
Exactly.
Right.
But that guidance doesn't really help much in the context of these recommendations. It doesn't do much for you all at all. So I think what I'd prefer to do is I can quickly do a synopsis of the Supreme Court decision, and then what I can do is put together a list of all of these changes and walk you through why I believe they're being recommended, and then you can choose whether you'd like to make them or not.
NHMA has I believe they have a model sign ordinance following the Supreme Court decision, do they not?
They do, and I think it will not be helpful in this
It will
case.
not be helpful.
Yeah, I don't think, also believe that these attorneys tend to just pick up that draft or that model ordinance and apply it universally. I think that's what's been done here, to be quite honest with you. Particularly things like safety of the traveling public, that's been added to the model sign ordinance. I'm not particularly sure why.
Okay.
So I think I need to walk through these changes one by one with you all, because I am just as uncomfortable, and I don't want you to be uncomfortable with this if it needs to go to the public.
Right, well, yeah, especially, yes, okay.
Any sign that could jeopardize someone's health, safety, should be taken down. We've had that conversation at this board. We've had somebody stand in front of this board and tell us that there are public safety hazards out there. I said, remove them. They're still there.
Is mental health qualified too?
I'm not going there. Public safety hazard is something that could hurt you and kill you.
I hate blade.
Okay,
If we
is
see any of those things, and they're small, we have some signs that are really small, they're about this big, that talk about something to eat, and they're not even outside the person's place of business. They should be removed. That we shouldn't even have a debate on that.
Okay, well, but right now, it's in the ordinance. The wayfinding sign, is that what you're okay, well then, that's.
No, this actually was a business advertising sign. Not a wayfinding sign, it was a business advertising sign, or business sign.
Okay,
It's in the prior minutes, prior to your time.
okay, I'm not sure. Well, does it have to do with this?
No.
The-
No, I was just reacting to a comment that Matt made. That's all.
That who made?
Matt made about public safety.
Okay, all right, so this is tabled to get more information.
And not on the EDC agenda.
And not on the EDC, yeah, it's.
That makes sense.
It's premature, we need to.
Makes sense.
Okay, the architectural design standards. These have been worked on by the committee. We brought the first version to the planning board on October 2nd, and I think that we've made all of the changes that planning board members mentioned at that time.
My only
And-
concern about these was in the illustrations.
Yep.
Obviously, you're going to clear the metadata and the captions throughout all these photographs?
Yep.
Okay.
And you'll remove the gas station?
Yes, Mr. O'Brien and I had a discussion earlier about the fact that a gas station is shown,
We don't permit those in Wolfeboro.
and I agree that it is problematic to show a gas station when they are not permissible anywhere in any zone within the community.
And again, one more time, I'll just apologize since I wasn't here.
We have
but
3 that could be renovated.
No, that's definitely true. That is true.
Yeah, but you know what? You're wasting valuable real estate here. Come on, give us a break. One of the things I would offer as a concern is, again, any data about the business being represented without their permission is probably not a good idea, especially if it's deemed to be inappropriate. That's poking your finger in somebody's eye.
So we chose only inappropriate structures that are not in Wolfeboro.
It doesn't matter. I can still launch an action against you if I'm in Boston. So I would be careful about that. And I haven't, deeply read this, but I just worry that referencing pictures leads us prospectively, not us. We should worry about the next town planner and the next planning board. That's who we should worry about. Leads somebody to say, well, you know what, I really don't like that color. I don't like those shutters. I don't like that tree. And I'm just worried that I don't like those columns.
So I think that's what the captions are for that aren't here yet, because we'll be describing exactly what is inappropriate or appropriate about the structure that we're showing.
So this is
This
still
was the first time the pictures have shown
Got
up,
it.
and actually some of them are just incorrect in
All right,
their
got it.
location.
This is a work in progress.
Yes, the pictures are.
And somehow I think you need to have the contrast so that some of these things show better. But that's
Yeah.
maybe not easy to do.
Yeah, for instance, like the appropriate, inappropriate under roofs, that middle one should really be inappropriate up under section 6, building scale and proportion.
Where do we address the question that says these are opinions? These are people's opinions.
It's actually,
Well,
It's someone's opinion that that second one that has the Subaru, is that
well,
Kathy's
maybe
Subaru?
we shouldn't be using the word appropriate and inappropriate.
I don't know, but these are opinions. And
or okay, we could say allowed and not allowed.
or encouraged or discouraged. I don't know what the right words are. Someone came before us a few years back and said, in their opinion, the Wright Museum was an example of poor design and architecture. In their opinion. Had we done that all over again, we probably would have designed the building the same way. It's a monument to the 1939, 1945. It's how people built buildings. So I worry that, I just worry about us imposing pictures and saying, you gotta be like that. If we wanna do that, we should say, here's an example in our town of mansard roofs that we like. Here's an example in our town of these kinds of things that we like in our town. And this is what you should look like. And so I would avoid, my personal opinion, I would avoid going outside of town and saying, here's a gas station over in Meredith that you ought to model your business after. We should pick things in our town that we want to celebrate and say, do more of those.
Well, we certainly can't pick things in our town and call them inappropriate.
No,
No, I would pick things that we want to.
Where do we get the contrast from?
Well,
Out of town,
well, why do we even need the contrast?
so that people can understand what
Yeah.
we're talking about with a picture.
Otherwise, you're going to have architectural standards which are book length.
Why wouldn't you just simply say, these are the things in our town that are
Try describing that in words.
I don't even want to.
No, well, actually, the words, it is supposed to help you understand what the words said.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So
Maybe I
that was
wasn't-
about building orientation.
Maybe I wasn't clear. I mean, if we took a photograph, if we did pictures, would we want more Avery block type of architecture in our town?
Sure.
Absolutely.
Actually, it might be.
Love it. All right. Would we want more, if you drive up North Main Street from a B&B point of view, there's, some B&Bs, 123 North Main, would we want more of those? We take a picture of it and say, that's what we like.
That's what we're doing.
But at the same time, Paul, you need to know what is really not allowed. And if you look at Section X, mechanical and utility equipment, you have two inappropriate things shown there, and those are important to say that's not what we want.
I agree. But what I would,
So these pictures are very important and show people quickly what the issue is. And then you'd say, okay, there are going to be 6 dozen other things which look like that, that are also inappropriate. But at least it gives the playing field which you're dealing with.
I agree that we need to be extremely clear about the fact that we don't want air conditioning units plunked on the top of the building, visible by, to the street or on the side of the building. I got that. And I agree that we don't want to have coolers in the back of people's property. I got that. I just think that showing someone else's business who happens to have that creates a target. someone could say, you are unfairly,
Well, then flip the pictures 180 degrees.
I don't know. Yeah, I just-
But you've got to show a picture somehow.
Yeah, well, a lot of towns have been doing this for many years, and I haven't heard of,
What-
like,
So do we have other towns, as in Durham?
yes,
New
yes.
Durham, Portsmouth, most of the
Meredith.
towns that have
Well, you should
architectural
have been on the
standards have.
committee.
I know, I'm sorry, I don't want to be on that committee.
Also,
But maybe you can show us what they've done in their zoning ordinance.
I could certainly bring an example to show you, yes. But it's just this.
We have a manufactured housing district in town, which probably wouldn't fit with any of these architectural standards, how even.
Well, it's only for multifamily and commercial,
These are,
the standards,
Okay, then.
yeah.
all right.
Yeah, it's
Let's
not for residential.
see, this is from Jaffrey, and they just have got, they have pictures. So, and I think a couple of the others that we had looked at had
Most of them,
had
do,
pictures.
yeah.
Durham had very specific,
Meredith does.
inappropriate, I don't know if that's the language they used, but good, I think they even had good and bad.
Bad.
I think permissible and not permissible may be the thing.
Conforming and non-conforming.
Yeah,
Well, I apologize, maybe has this stuff been circulated here and I just didn't get it?
All the examples?
Yeah.
No,
well, this
that
was all
committee.
things the
The
committee.
pictures are new.
These are new.
But I can send some examples around, I have them all.
Rob distributed a whole bunch of stuff back in the day.
Well, that was for the
Right.
signs, wasn't it?
No, it was for, we started this
Yeah, and actually,
in 15.
there's some stuff in here, Matt, that's just not appropriate, that says appropriate underneath it. I think it's just,
And we do
Like,
want to
that-
keep,
this, we never
we want to
said that
keep
was
it
appropriate.
positive, is what,
that's inappropriate.
And under section 12, in your second paragraph, where you acknowledge that in some cases standards,
This arrangement of windows,
section 12,
like
in
an AK 47, no,
okay.
section 12, second paragraph, you talk about essentially what a waiver is. You might want to say something specifically that there is a waiver process or something to that effect. You acknowledge that in some cases, building may not be appropriately brought up to these kinds of standards. You might let the reader know that in those cases, a waiver process exists.
Yeah.
well, no, the waiver is that it comes under site plan review.
Yeah,
It's subject, it's not a zoning regulation,
Then,
it's a site plan review.
yeah, right.
State specifically somewhere.
It does, right?
does?
Yeah. Waiver
Beginning.
requests
Oh, okay. I just thought that
shall be,
you might
re-
put it there too, but that's okay. If you have it there, you're fine.
We're talking about the building, so these will have.
but maybe we can emphasize that a little bit more.
Only if you think it needs to be.
And
If it
no,
says-
no,
If it says specifically in process, I don't think you need to.
yeah, and y'all stayed away from any sidewalk treatments or any of that stuff, right?
Yeah, we're not, we're
You
talking
kinda-
about
you-
buildings only.
Just buildings only? Okay. So you stayed away from dealing with the sidewalk stuff.
And we took out pocket park kind of language, that sort of, yeah, that was in one draft. It's a little park, like Durgan Block has one.
Oh,
Okay, well, how do you folks want to proceed with these?
Keep
I
striving.
think we need to add captions. And I think we need to get some,
Okay,
The zoning change is really just to remove the existing references to the voluntary design guidelines, which should still be related to the class. I can bring those changes to the board.
So they'll be on our next agenda. Good.
okay, but, I mean, are all of you in favor of moving ahead with these?
I am. I think we need something. We have nothing currently.
Okay,
We need something.
okay,
This is a good step,
just trying to get a,
in my opinion.
okay, everybody's on board here, okay. Okay, now, we have the CDC meeting next Tuesday. We had planned to talk about these.
I don't think we're ready.
Yeah, I'm concerned
You plan to
about
talk about this?
Yeah.
the architectural standards.
Or could there be
And-
some comment or some discussion in general terms without showing this document?
Yes, right.
That'd be
Could we show it without the pictures and say we're working on our caption section, like the the draft without the pictures?
I think that'd be fine. I think that would be productive.
Yeah.
Right,
It's short, it's brief, and say we're working on the captions
Yeah,
and the pictures.
yeah, right.
To get a general sense of
Yes,
And
Yeah.
it would allow them to have some input, which they might
right,
use.
right, yeah, yes, yep,
I have said it a couple times, I'll say it on the record, I think that we should invite people who have business interests. By the way, I think according to this document, it's not this one, because we don't like that one, I think this one, this headwater document, this headwater document, you read it, says that the largest employers in our town are contractors, building contractors. And I would like to get their input on this. I want to make sure that when we ask people to vote on it, we can have the engineers, contractors, and architects standing up and saying, makes sense, makes good sense, it's good for our town. And I think that the conversation we would have with other people may become more of a political conversation. I would like to have a technical conversation. So enough said on that point. As it relates to the EDC, I read their minutes, if I may, Kathy, I read the minutes of the EDC meeting, and when I read the Headwaters report, this thing here, we've all read that, and it said, you stated that he sent the document out via email. Somebody noted that the document, she skimmed the document and noted that the information is not reliable. My question to the EDC, which I'd like to have, a conversation is what data, what economic data are they contributing or can they contribute to the master plan? That would be, I think, something that we could have a good, a good conversation, because it went on in the meeting that you replied the charts in the report provide a clear picture. Somebody else said it seemed that it seems the information they should review. Somebody said, no, the data is not bogus. We do have a concern. Somebody else said, oh, enrollment in the public school is up this year. It sounded like it was kind of revolving around what data will they use for the master plan?
What chapter is that?
I mean, I can respond with my opinion.
I don't want an opinion. I think this is a good agenda item for our EDC.
Okay.
Is there a
Because one of
chapter?
their charters is to conduct periodic assessments.
They don't write a chapter, we do.
Right?
They
And
may be a subcommittee, but they don't,
Yeah, no, but what are the chapters that?
There's an economic development chapter.
but they're not writing it.
No.
Unless we commission them to.
I think that remains to be answered. I'm not trying to dodge that question. I don't know.
They have no authority to do that. It's the planning board.
Oh, certainly. Nobody has authority other than the planning board.
But here's where I come out. I mean, the conversation around signs, it would be good for them to tackle once we're ready to proffer it to them. And I think the conversation around architectural design would be good once we got input from architects and engineers and people of that ilk. And it would take it out of the political domain. A technical conversation about what data should we be looking at in order to construct our master plan. I think we're all over the place right now. We have some people who say, no, the town isn't, the town doesn't have an age demographic issue. Some people say, yeah, we do. I think we ought to kind of hone in on that a little bit and just ask them to share with us where they think we ought to take this stuff. It's part of their charter to conduct periodic assessments of economic data, employment statistics, and things of that nature. If the Headwaters document, did we pay for this?
No.
If the Headwaters document is wrong, then we should put that down, tip it over, and say, well, which one should we use? That would be I think that would be a great conversation. If this document here, the Wolfeboro Master Plan Survey, which says that this one, which we paid for, If you read this document, it tells you a lot about what people like and don't like about our town, which actually is corroborated in this document. If this thing's wrong, let's put that down and say, well, which one should we use? That would be, to me, it's not an inspection question, but it would be a technical conversation about what's the best way to look at the way this town is going to behave in the future, as opposed to, maybe some other stuff. That's enough said.
Question for Matt.
Yes.
Do you expect the architectural standards to be in a form ready for presentation to public hearing by January 4, when you have to post notice that it's going to be heard?
No,
There's site plan
this is
regulation.
Site plan,
It's site plan stuff.
Because it doesn't need to be
It's
public.
not zoning.
Right.
right,
That's why I'm not as concerned.
right.
Okay.
Yes. Not to say I'm not concerned, but
Agree aside the relief.
Yeah.
we don't have the same deadline in place. Yeah, we have some flexibility.
And we could have an ad hoc, conversation with economic development about the political, because they'll look at this thing with and I'm not saying political is bad. They're going to look at this thing and say, that's not really smart. I'd like to have the architects and engineers and contractors weigh in and say, this is what we think, and we kind of bounce it off EDC and say, now we have a better picture. That's all.
Okay. So the architectural design, we're going to send those to the EDC people before the meeting without the pictures, right?
Yeah, I think that's what I'm hearing generally, but
Okay. We wanted to get some feedback from them, and then the next step is to go and have a public session.
So we are going to send that to them, and that's going to be an agenda item?
Well, that's what we just talked about.
That's not what I
We
thought.
just said without the pictures.
No, you were broadening the picture, I think, isn't it?
That's not what I talked about.
Not the right time to broaden the
I
picture.
pushed back when you came back 5 days after we said on October 3rd, we were going to sit down and have an agenda discussion about what is fertile for the EDC. You came back 5 days later and said EDC wants to talk about the architectural standards. I pushed back and said, I think that's not appropriate. So yes, go ahead and do it, but I think that's, we need more of their help in a different area.
Oh, okay, well, right now, we're trying to get things ready for the warrant. And,
But this isn't a warrant article.
well, it will be. Parts of it will be.
The part of taking the guidelines out of the zoning.
right,
Right,
revocation would be.
yeah. And so we're just trying to update them on things that we're doing, I thought. We need to tell them about the hotels.
What about the
What about the
hotels?
hotels?
That we're,
Number.
no, that we're not changing the number and that we're combined, but there will be
There's a new definition.
there's a new definition that we all agreed to. If this isn't the type of meeting you wanted to have, tell us now. I mean, and we can,
I just did.
Yeah, we certainly don't have to have the meeting.
right.
That's not the point. I think we should have the meeting. Kathy, I think we have an urgent need to have clarity and common understanding of the economic status of our town. I think that's the issue that I hold as a centerpiece issue.
We're going to do that by Tuesday?
Well, I don't know.
Yeah, right,
Or
right.
maybe we just have a meeting and just kind of throw stuff around.
No, not at all. I don't mean to disparage you at all.
No,
I appreciate your concern. but
Just trying to figure out how we're gonna pull this off in
Well, the assumption we're
7
making
days.
here is that the Economic Development Committee doesn't worry about the economic status of our town, and I gotta believe they do, and I'd like to really hear from them as to how they're gonna help us.
Well, then, why are we asking to have a meeting if you're saying that they don't understand?
I didn't say that. Let me try it one more time.
Well, I mean, let's keep it a little friendly, okay?
Well, no, you
Okay,
asked
I'm
me
not
to
here to
push
argue
back
with you,
in.
I'm trying to understand and move things ahead with what I thought the planning board members wanted to do, and I thought that that was a general agreement that you wanted to meet with the EDC. If you don't, that's okay.
Kathy, with the highest amount of respect, I think you're twisting it. So let me explain why I believe that.
What
We
was
had
that? I'm
I
sorry.
think you're twisting things.
I'm not twisting anything, I'm just
Let me
trying to...
explain why I believe that. On our October 3rd meeting, we spent time, it's in the minutes, we spent time saying, you know what, we should have a conversation with the Economic Development Committee. Fact. We spent time, Vaughn, Michael, myself, others, spent time saying we really should have an agenda to do that.
Yes.
Fact. All right? This is the first time we've had an agenda conversation.
Right.
Now, you are a member of EDC because you're town staff.
Sure.
Came back 4 days after we had our meeting and said, I forgot to mention that EDC wants to interface with us on the architectural standards issue. That was an email you sent to all of us. Fact. I pushed back on that and said, you know, I think that's probably good, but we really should be getting engineers, architects, we should get technical advice. Fact. Now, I sit here, and no disrespect, Kathy, but that to me just feels to me like it fell right on deaf ears. We come to this session tonight, and what do we want to talk about with EDC? We want to talk about the standards or the architectural standards. So I sit here, and very honestly, I sit here and I say to myself, I felt like I was talking to that wall. Or you could have very easily said to me, Paul, you know what? We're not going to deal with that. We're going to just do what we think is right. So my objective here was to say, what could the EDC be very helpful to us with? I read the EDC minutes. I observe in the EDC minutes that we have people on that Economic Development Committee that are looking at documents that are being pushed around the town and saying, bad data. And my point is, we're about to write a master plan, and I want to know what the right data needs to be, and that, to me, is what the conversation should be. So if I came across as being mean to you, I apologize. But that's how I feel right now. I feel as if what I said just fell on deaf ears, we had the agenda fixed, figured out, and we're just going to do it. If that's the case, fine.
No, well, no agenda has been fixed.
No, I didn't.
Are you- If that's,
Yeah,
no,
and
that hasn't happened.
And one of the things that you can,
Maybe I'm behind times here, but it
It's not a
simply
question of being
hasn't
behind or ahead of the
happened.
yeah, I'm not sure how engineers are going to respond to architectural guidelines. I mean, that has nothing to do with engineering.
But we wouldn't know until we asked them.
I think we do have some stakeholders that we can reach out to, and a discussion that I'm not sure who this discussion took place with, was that as people come into our office, we could have the draft available for them to take and review and give us comments if they'd like, and we could also do some direct outreach. So I think that's a worthwhile effort. I think we should do that. I think the only question now related to what Paul has said is, should we do that before we interface with the EDC or not? I think that's part of what Paul is saying.
I think we need subject matter expertise on everything we do, and then when we get to the end of the process, we do a checkbox with our friends at EDC that says, how does this work for the economy of the town?
Well, we do it, Paul, if I may, with architectural standards, as every other zoning issue that we deal with, we do have expertise. We have him sitting at the end of the table. He's a professional planner. We have, through the internet, the experience of every other town in the state. We look at their zoning, we take from them, and we use what Matt suggests, and we craft an ordinance. I think we're perfectly capable, these two ladies are perfectly capable of crafting architectural standards, architectural guidelines, whatever you want to call them, from what we know, what they know, professional architect here, what Matt the planner knows, and what is available from Durham, Portsmouth, every other, Exeter, every other town in the state of New Hampshire that has architectural standards. I don't think we have to reach out to technicians, engineers to help us craft that kind of an ordinance any more than we have to reach out to the myriad of planners in the state when we come to write an ordinance on simple zoning issues, like signs, for example. That's my thought. As far as your second issue, presenting these things to the EDC, maybe it is a little bit premature because it's a half-baked project at this stage. We haven't gone very far, but it can't hurt to get their input. Sooner or later, they're going to deal with them and they're going to yell at us or not. I don't see any reason why.
I would suggest that if the discussion is had with them, and then it becomes apparent that more information is needed of more technical nature, then we can go get it. But
So we're relying on them for what? Since we don't rely on architects and
We're going
engineers
to-
because we can do it ourselves, what are we relying on
We're
them
not
to tell us?
relying, I don't think we're relying on EDC for anything. We're gathering their input. They represent a cross-section of people in the town, business interests, non-business interests, general investment interests. They're going to give us their impressions of what we're trying to do here, and it's going to be one piece of data that we're using, the datum that we're going to be using to craft the standards with. We're not going to them as if they were an oracle and expecting a revelation from them that's going to guide our pathway. We're going to use them simply as a sounding board, a particular section of the town sounding board. This is going to go elsewhere too. We're going to hear.
My last comment, I believe we're not taking full advantage of what the EDC has to offer us. I park it there. We're using them as a political, because they don't bring any more expertise than Vaughn brings. Vaughn's an architect.
That may well be.
So they're giving us and I think at this point in the process, if I had the plethora of things that are in front of this town, we have warrant articles, we're gonna spend a lot of money in the future, we have the master plan that we're now almost a calendar year into. We have a lot of things in front of us. If I were racking up the things I thought were important, I'd ask them to be right up there with us, dealing with sizing the economy of our town. I just don't think we're taking advantage of their resources. And I think that's a near-term and a long-term mistake, because this will turn out to be a bobbing head conversation, and I don't think it's appropriate. We're unbaked.
Don't you think that's a separate issue from what we've been talking about?
No.
Architectural standards?
No.
Well, one
I
of
mean,
the
architectural
reasons we
sorry.
started with architectural standards is because we had this hotel issue come up. One of our major concerns was, the big box hotel. And nobody wants it. We had an expert, Rusty McClure, came and he talked about it. We had a bunch of constituents, hoteliers, come and talk to us about what they need.
By the way, brought to us by the
Just
EDC.
let her finish, please.
That's correct.
Yeah, but, and the EDC kept resounding that we had guidelines and we could control the architecture, when in fact we know we can't. So we started talking about how we do that without being too heavy-handed. And the way to do that is not to put it as absolute in zoning, but to put it in site plan review so that there's some flexibility. And if you give them a document that says this is what we're looking for, and here are some pictures, this is a good idea and this is a bad idea, then we can craft a town or buildings and structures that look like our town, that don't look like they belong on some strip in Texas, which is what we're concerned about. We don't want the generic Holiday Inn. And they said we wouldn't get it. And we said, well, we might, so it's a discussion that started with the EDC, actually changing the regulation.
So then we did have an agenda on October 3rd.
I don't know what October 3rd
That
was.
was when we said we should sit down and talk about an agenda. We really thought this was the right thing to talk about.
No, architectural standards came from the EDC as a suggestion, and then Matt presented it to us post-October 3rd. There was no agenda October 3rd. This has grown organically. We're not required to accept EDC's suggestion of a meeting to discuss architectural standards. We can not discuss anything that we want with them. We're under no obligation to listen to them at all if we don't want to, frankly. As far as the larger picture.
Except they are a town body, and I think that it's nice
It's good to.
that we work cooperatively.
Correct. But as far as your bigger issue that you raised, EDC as an asset to the analysis of the economic health and direction of the town, you're absolutely right. And at that point, when that comes up, we should sit down with them and really listen to them when it comes to discussing those particular issues. But I think those are separate from the architectural standard, although given the fact that architectural standards will affect the economy of the town.
So are we going to see anything between now and next Tuesday, based upon the fact that we looked at these architectural standards and the pictures may not be right? Are we going to see anything? Or are we going to see it at the same time?
Well, we just agreed to take out the pictures, that's the only change we just mentioned.
So are we,
And so that's just removing the pictures.
Other than the,
Isn't that, is that
Well, I think
what we
just
agreed to?
giving information about what we're doing and how we're moving forward is the point of this, and, you know, generating some discussion about what our method is, whether or not, you know, it seems it's appropriate or not.
yeah, we're enlisting them in the process in an early phase. We're giving them a discussion document or a document for discussion and requesting their input at a point where the document can be changed very easily. It's not as if we're within a week or two of having to present this to the public.
The other issue is that we are, you know, there was some comment that that this is a political thing we're doing. If we as a planning board said that all buildings have to be built with exactly these specifications, and then it turns out that the business people in town think that that's absolutely stupid, our regulation isn't going to pass. And so therefore, we do in fact want to have that input from them so that the regulations or the changes which we want to make actually get passed. And so we are in fact having to work with the politic of the town.
Oh, I absolutely agree with that. I'm not
so
using that as a bad word. I think it's small p, it's not the big P. I mean, we have political conversations, say, how do we make sure that this works? We have technical issues we have to deal with. Those are the two things you deal with in any.
So I think what we need to do is we need to go forwards and talk with these people in general terms and then see what their comments are. And then we may figure we need to have more technical information from engineers or whoever. But I think that we need to go forward with this so that we get a conversation going.
Hey, why are we having the meeting next week and not the work session?
so I was concerned that we would have too much on our agenda for the work session for other zoning and other things. I didn't want to, similar to sort of this meeting where we have a lot on the agenda, I didn't want to overburden the board. We could certainly ask them if they'd like to push it out, though. I think that's fine.
I think that might, now I'm going to sound like a heretic. I mean, that might just make us look like fools. We just went ahead and, you know, we've said this all along, and I agree with you, Kathy. We've said this all along. We should have conversations. These conversations should be, at least initially, highly structured, so that they don't turn into, you know, whatever they turn into. And now to simply say, you know, what I've heard you guys say, and I'm out of this one. What I've heard you guys say is we're ready to have a conversation about architectural standards. So let's go do that. Let's do it. I wouldn't delay the meeting because it'll make us look stupid.
Yeah, they'll ask, what are you trying to hide?
That's right. So if we think we're ready, bingo, let's do that.
We're not ready, we're ready for a discussion.
Yeah, we're ready to have a conversation with them.
This says there won't be another meeting in the future. I mean,
Yeah, right, with
Let's
the
do it.
master plan and, right.
what other things are you all interested in having in that agenda? I mean, we talked about the hotels, we talked about, now I think architectural standards. What else should be on there?
Isn't that enough? How long is this meeting
Well,
going to
that's what I'm asking. I mean, I think we should budget.
Hotels is going to be a contentious issue. And it's going to take
Well, the
40 minutes,
definition
half an hour.
shouldn't be.
Right.
The definition will not be. The other
Yeah.
issue.
Well, Vaughn and I were gonna get the agenda
Can I
together.
on that one? I've read the minutes of the EDC. Kathy Eaton, the chairman, is, and actually a couple of members of the EDC have continued to raise the issue that the 50-bed limit should be, you know, changed, modified, whatever. How many members of the EDC are there? 10, 12? They had to vote in majority to recommend that we would change that. So at least they have 6 voting members who have said, we think that that the ordinance should be changed. All they need is 14 more people. And they could recommend through a warrant article to us. They have the ability to do that. 20 signatures, they could say the EDC recommends to the planning board the warrant article. We would then have to, you know, that would be good. The EDC would stand up and be counted. They've already been counted, at least in majority. We would have to then put, you know, whatever our beliefs are, and it would go to the people of our town. We would dispose of the issue. We would disposition this thing. It would not be bad blood. We would move on. Why don't we just simply recommend they do that?
Recommend a petition article,
Put a warrant article on.
a zoning amendment?
Yes.
How many of them usually pass? And do you think that they not know that too?
Well, wait, no. Hey, let's not do that.
I think
That's a
it'd be-
game.
I
Let's
think
not play
it'd
that
be a- I
game.
think it's a
They
futile
voted in
exercise.
majority to ask us to change it. That's at least 6.
Well,
Let's-
that is an option. I think
think they
I
should.
think they know that,
Do they?
yes.
I'm not sure they do, but I would think they would, but I don't know.
Could you
for
remind them?
They're
Yeah,
politically
no, I think they know that.
Well, then if they, then,
I mean,
I believe they do.
they're pretty
I think it
connected
would be
folks.
fatal for this board, as a board, to recommend to
Correct,
the
I do
EDC,
too.
you should go to the town with a petition warrant article to change the size of hotel beds from 50 to whatever we want it to be. I think that's
I-
future.
Yeah, I think that's.
I think, though, that the 50 limit is the issue that we may be trying to solve with having these guidelines.
really?
I mean,
How do you do that?
well, because then you don't get the box. You don't get the, Holiday Inn Express.
And you
may
can
get-
permit a hotel by exception. We could permit a
already can.
7,500 room by
Well, you
exception.
could, that is an option that I think maybe we should think about, is that you could have hotels up to X rooms by special exception.
Well, we have that in the ordinance already, though, right?
I'd like to
No,
have.
no, we don't, but that would require an ordinance change, but it may be something that,
But it would be something that we could discuss, after we have control about what we're going to get, what kind of a building we're going to get. And then the other part of that discussion is what about the hoteliers that we have in town?
Which we still owe some answers to.
Well, we do. No, so then we should say to the EDC, well, if you suddenly have an 80-room hotel, even if it meets our standards, have we really helped the people who have been in town for 600 years?
Yeah, all of whom
60 years.
unanimously said they did not want
Well,
to change.
exactly.
Right.
So then we
Yeah,
have that
right.
discussion again with everybody.
To get back to the point,
but we-
hotels on the agenda, architectural standards on the agenda, and I think that you've eaten up as much time as anyone's going to want to give to the
right, and we need to talk,
Definition of hotels is on the agenda?
yes.
definition and size.
That we changed.
Definition and size?
And,
Did we vote to take that off the table or put that back on the table?
It's not on the table. Size is not on the table.
We voted to say we'd keep it the way it
We're
is.
discussing with
keeping the
EDC.
way
Yeah,
it is.
no, he said that size was a conversation we wanted to have.
If they're going to raise the issue of size, 'cause
Size.
it's already been raised in their
And-
minutes.
and when
They
we-
want to talk to us about it, we can change our minds.
yeah,
Well, we'd have to vote kind of in the same majority that we voted to put it back on the
But
table.
the point is, if we're talking about what to have on our agenda with EDC, an issue that is necessarily going to rise because it rose in their minutes, so it's on their minds, is hotel definition and size.
right.
And
Which-
we asked them
yeah.
to talk about architectural
Standards.
standards. so
Right,
those are
and
two
we,
issues for the agenda.
last year, we agreed that we thought architectural standards should be in place first.
Right.
And that's why we got started down that
Right.
road.
So we're following through.
And
with
so
our-
we're really doing what we said we were gonna do. Oh my gosh, what a surprise. But,
No, and that's, it's
I
not.
know, I got the work plan here. I'm checking the boxes here, Kathy.
Which would you prefer to discuss first?
hotels,
And I know that's a
15-minute discussion.
no. I mean, just
I think we should start with the language of
hotels,
definition,
yeah.
definition of what a hotel is.
Yeah.
And then we should go into the architectural standards.
Yep.
And then we could
And,
talk
and
about,
then I think we should throw in some discussion on signs, just to put the frosting on the cake.
Signage?
there.
That's three.
Well, just,
Signage, did you say?
yeah, that we are talking about some changes.
How long is this meeting supposed to be?
And I'm gonna-
4 hours.
And I'm gonna be
Okay, so you
argumentative
just
here.
want the 2 items?
What do
Okay.
we hope to accomplish by doing this?
If nothing else, make them feel like they're part of the process.
And they may have some
Yeah,
ideas
they
which
might
are
have some
outside of this
ideas.
particular group of individuals.
Especially with the architectural standards.
God help us. I'd like just a question. Could we get rules of procedure as to what's required to put a vote that we've already taken to undo that vote? I'd like to know what the rules
What
are.
vote
I
is?
just want that as a rule, as a question.
We
There's
can
nothing in the
do-
rules of procedure about,
Votes, we can revote, we can't revote on applications.
We can't change ordinance.
We can't change ordinances, but things that are pending that we haven't
just keep voting on it
finalized,
till
we
we get 'em right?
can,
No,
we
if
can
if we decide that
reconsider if we have new information.
Yeah, if we change our minds and say 50 is an artificial limit and we should really have 100, we can change our minds, do that, and then go to town warrant with a new ordinance that says 100.
Okay.
Or no limit.
Well, does that answer your question?
That just, it answers the question, says you keep voting on something until you get it right.
Exactly.
And I just don't think that's proper.
I hate to take a mistake to the town. Rather get it right.
No, there's a
If
procedure for
somebody
taking
brings
something
you
that
in-
you've already voted on back to the table. It's you
Just
petition for
raise it.
reconsideration.
Okay, well, it would-
I make a motion that this board reconsider the 50-bed limit, and I get a second, and it's on the table. That's how it's done.
Right.
That's right.
It's easy.
Yep.
Sorry. I'm getting testy.
Okay, so we should
No, I'm
try to
not
keep
getting
it
testy,
to...
Michael. You're pointing out what I think is something that concerns me a little bit, and I'm sorry, maybe it's because of the late hour.
Procedural flaw?
No, it is, we need to think deeply about the things we work on. We need to get as much help as we can, and if there is new information, we should revote. But I'm not sure we're working on the most important stuff. I know this is going to be hurtful, but it feels to me like we're having a meeting to check a box, and I don't feel comfortable with that.
No,
You
not...
can disagree, Kevin.
Not to
I
check-
am
not-
interested in getting more information from another group of people. And that is why I want to meet with this group of people.
It's fine.
And if you want to keep it completely insular and not talk to people, I don't think you have the right
That's
point of
not
view.
what I said.
No, it's not what he said.
That's not at all what I said.
I think
What I
it's-
said is we ought to get the best people in a room to help us with the most urgent problems we
So
have.
let's talk to these people
Okay,
and
but
see
the
what
board
happens.
has decided all of the priorities. We together have done that. Well, Paul, I mean, you
I'm all
keep
set.
snickering
I'm all set,
and
Kathy.
having these little side things.
I'm all
I
set.
don't get that.
No, I don't get that comment.
Well, no, but you just did it. I don't know what that means. All I know is that the things that we're working on are things that we all have decided that we should be working on
We've been hammering out
together.
the agenda.
I mean, nobody has, no one has said, we have to do this. I mean, the sign thing, I guess we do have to look at that, but we've looked at all of these things together, so I don't understand.
Kathy, thank you for that. I appreciate it. I don't buy it.
You know, this is your opinion.
That's
You're
right, my
entitled
opinion.
to it. Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So, if we don't have to vote on everything.
right. I agree.
You've got to voice your opinion.
And I have.
That's good.
Okay,
I will,
all right.
I will put together an agenda. I'll share the architectural standards with the EEC. They meet next Tuesday morning before this meeting would take place. I can share this agenda with them. I will do my best to make sure they don't have too much of a discussion about the agenda before arriving so that we can have an open discussion. But I'll make sure they're prepared for the meeting that night, and I will clear the agenda and send it to all of you as well.
Well, Vaughn and I are supposed to be doing the agenda.
Okay, you can,
What are you sending them ahead of time?
I was just going to send them the
And
agenda.
we send it
and
to,
the
it
architectural
goes to
standards.
everybody on Friday.
I'm sorry.
It will go to everyone over the weekend, like we usually do.
Yes. And I would send them the definition that the board has actually already voted to send to public hearing. I would send that to them as well. Because I know that's been already cleared at this level, so I'll pass that along as well.
If you could put your, okay, so we need to adjourn, folks.
So moved.
Okay,
So moved.
thank you. Okay. Hey,
Favor, aye.